Welcome to the Untold Rome, Hidden Stories of the Forgotten Majority. Subtitle: Exploring the Lives of Rome's Everyday Heroes Who Built an Empire. Written by A. Peters and narrated by Michael K. Rome. The very name evokes grand images, soaring marble columns, the commanding presence of emperors, and the sheer might of an empire that once stretched across continents. For centuries, this narrative has dominated our understanding of ancient Rome. Yet beneath this glimmering surface lies another Rome, a hidden world populated by the uncelebrated majority who built, sustained, and defined the empire's daily life. This book aims to peel back the layers of history to reveal the lives that have remained in the shadows. When we think of Rome, we often think of the extraordinary: Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon, Augustus's sweeping reforms, or the triumphal arches and colossal structures that still dot the Italian landscape. However, the focus on emperors, senators, and generals offers only a sliver of the truth. What about the farmer who toiled to grow the grain that fed the legions, the slave who crafted the mosaics that adorned luxurious villas, the woman who prayed to household gods for her family's safety? These stories are seldom told, and yet they are the foundation of Rome's grandeur. Without these invisible hands, there would have been no empire at all. The idea of the forgotten majority is not new, but it has often been overshadowed by the glories of the elite. Ancient historians like Livy and Tacitus, whose works form the backbone of our understanding of Rome, primarily wrote about the powerful. They chronicled wars, political intrigues, and the exploits of emperors. In doing so, they largely ignored the vibrant, complex world of the common people. It is only through painstaking archaeological discoveries, fragments of legal texts, inscriptions, and personal artifacts that we can begin to reconstruct the lives of those who lived beyond the palace gates and senate chambers. This book invites you to journey through the bustling marketplaces, cramped insulae, and dusty roads of ancient Rome. It delves into the lives of the plebeians, slaves, women, and immigrants who built the empire from the ground up. Far from the marble facades and golden domes, their stories are etched in the worn stone of millstones, the soot-streaked walls of tenements, and the carefully preserved graffiti that whispers their voices across millennia. Each chapter unveils a distinct aspect of their world, from the precarious existence of urban laborers to the spiritual lives of rural farmers, ensuring that their experiences remain vivid and distinct. One of the myths this book seeks to dismantle is that history is solely the story of the powerful. On the contrary, the ordinary citizens of Rome were not merely passive subjects of imperial policy or nameless cogs in a vast machine. They were resilient, resourceful, and at times rebellious. They lived, loved, dreamed, and struggled in ways that resonate deeply with the human experience. By understanding their lives, we gain a fuller, more inclusive picture of Rome and, by extension, the foundations of Western civilization. The methodology of this book blends historical analysis with narrative techniques to bring these untold stories to life. Archaeological findings. From the preserved ruins of Pompeii to the humble tools found in rural estates, provide the bedrock of our exploration. Historical texts, though often biased toward the elite, offer glimpses into the lives of the majority through offhand mentions or legal edicts. By weaving these sources together, we aim to create a tapestry that is both factual and vivid, breathing life into the ancient world. Why tell these stories now? The answer lies in our present. Modern societies are grappling with issues of inequality, migration, and the erasure of marginalized voices from history. By looking back at Rome's forgotten majority, we gain not only a deeper understanding of the past, but also insights into the enduring struggles of ordinary people. Their resilience, ingenuity, and capacity to adapt to challenges offer timeless lessons for us today. This is not a tale of emperors and their triumphs. It is a story of endurance and survival, of lives lived in the shadows but no less vital to the beating heart of Rome. It is a reminder that history is not only written by the victors, but also whispered by those who had little but left much. As we embark on this journey, let us reimagine Rome through their eyes and rediscover the empire as it truly was, a mosaic of countless lives, each contributing to the splendor and complexity of one of history's greatest civilizations. Let us step beyond the marble. The city of Rome, gleaming with temples, theaters, and triumphal arches, presented a visage of grandeur unmatched in the ancient world. Yet beneath this veneer of marble and gold, another Rome existed, one that sprawled in the shadow of its monumental architecture. This was the Rome of the plebeians, the urban poor who formed the lifeblood of the empire. Their daily lives unfolded in insulae, towering tenement buildings, and along the narrow, winding streets that wove through the city's crowded districts. Their struggles, resilience, and ingenuity tell a story of survival within the bustling heart of an empire that was both vibrant and unforgiving. To understand the life of the Roman poor, one must begin with their homes. Insulae were a far cry from the grand villas of the patricians, or even the modest domus of the middle classes. These multi-story tenements, constructed hastily and often precariously, housed families in cramped, poorly ventilated rooms. Fire was a constant threat, as the wooden beams that supported the structures were highly flammable, and open flames were a necessity for cooking and warmth. The poet Juvenal, in his satirical commentary, described the ever-present danger. Who is safe in such a building, where fire is fed by old timbers and the walls threaten to crumble under their own weight? In these overcrowded quarters, privacy was a luxury few could afford. Multiple families frequently shared a single room, with thin partitions barely muffling the sounds of life, arguments, lullabies, the clatter of pots. Despite the challenges, insulae were more than just places of shelter. They were hubs of community. Within their confines, neighbors forged bonds, pooling resources and labor to navigate the hardships of urban living. Life in the insulae spilled out onto the streets, where much of the daily activity occurred. Roman streets were vibrant but chaotic, filled with vendors hawking goods, children playing, and artisans plying their trades. The air was heavy with the scent of freshly baked bread mingling with the less pleasant odors of refuse and sewage. Sanitation posed a significant challenge in the densely packed city. While aqueducts brought fresh water to Rome, access was uneven, and many poor families relied on public fountains or water carriers to meet their needs. Waste management was rudimentary, with chamber pots often emptied into the streets or public latrines that were breeding grounds for disease. The diet of the urban poor reflected their limited means, but also their ingenuity in making the most of what was available. Grain, provided through the annona, a state-sponsored grain dole, formed the staple of their meals. Bread was a constant, accompanied by porridge or a simple stew of lentils and vegetables when possible. Meat was a rarity, reserved for special occasions or fortunate windfalls. Instead, fish, olives, and garum, a fermented fish sauce, added flavor to their meals. Street food was ubiquitous, and taverns or tabernae offered inexpensive meals for those who could afford a break from cooking. Disease was an omnipresent threat in this environment, exacerbated by poor hygiene and overcrowding. Epidemics swept through the city with alarming regularity, claiming the lives of countless citizens. Children, especially, were vulnerable to malnutrition and illness, leading to high mortality rates among the young. Yet, even in the face of such adversity, the urban poor exhibited remarkable resilience. They adapted to their circumstances with ingenuity, crafting remedies from local herbs, and relying on communal support networks to endure periods of hardship. Fire, disease, and the challenges of daily survival did not define the Roman poor entirely. Their lives were also marked by moments of joy and cultural richness. Festivals offered a reprieve from the struggles of everyday life, as did the public baths, where Romans of all classes mingled to cleanse themselves and socialize. The amphitheaters and circuses provided entertainment, albeit often at a cost. Chariot races and gladiatorial games were not just spectacles, but also opportunities for the plebeians to voice their approval or dissent, making these venues a potent space for political expression. The plebeians were not merely passive participants in the empire's grand narrative. They shaped it in subtle yet profound ways. Through their labor, they sustained Rome's infrastructure and economy. They were the masons who built the aqueducts, the bakers who fed the city, and the porters who hauled goods to market. Their voices, though often absent from the historical record, echoed in the graffiti they scrawled on walls, the inscriptions they left in cemeteries, and the communal traditions they passed down through generations. To walk the streets of Rome in antiquity was to encounter a kaleidoscope of humanity, vendors calling out their wares, children dodging carts, and laborers returning home after long hours of toil. It was a world of contrasts, where the sublime and the squalid coexisted, shaping a city that pulsed with life in every corner. For the urban poor, life was a delicate balance of endurance and hope, a testament to the strength of the human spirit in the face of adversity. As we delve further into the layers of Roman society, the lives of the plebeians remind us that history is not only built on the deeds of the powerful, but also on the everyday struggles and triumphs of the majority. Their story sets the stage for the chapters that follow, which will illuminate other facets of the forgotten majority, from the silent toil of slaves to the pivotal roles of women and immigrants in shaping the Rome we think we know. The streets of Rome never truly slept. By dawn, bakers worked their ovens, readying the bread that would feed the city. Dockworkers unloaded cargo from far-off provinces, while craftsmen in bustling workshops turned raw materials into everyday necessities. Behind these daily rhythms lay an invisible force, a vast undercurrent that kept the empire's heart beating: the slaves. They were the silent backbone of Roman society, performing the labor that underpinned the empire's grandeur while enduring lives marked by exploitation, resilience, and, occasionally, hope. Slavery in Rome was unlike the chattel slavery of later centuries, yet it was no less brutal. Enslaved individuals came from across the known world, captured as spoils of war or sold into servitude due to debt or misfortune. They arrived in chains, stripped of their identities and reduced to property. In the empire's thriving slave markets, a human being's value was assessed with chilling detachment. Youth, strength, and specific skills could command higher prices. A skilled Greek tutor might fetch a fortune, while a laborer destined for grueling work in the mines was considered expendable. For many, life as a slave began with the humiliating branding of their flesh, marking them as the property of their owners. Yet within this shared condition, the experiences of slaves varied widely. Household slaves, or familia urbana, often lived in close proximity to their masters, serving as cooks, cleaners, or personal attendants. Some might be treated with relative kindness, forming bonds with the families they served. Others endured constant abuse, their lives dictated by the whims of their owners. In the countryside, familia rustica toiled on large estates, cultivating crops and tending livestock. Their days were long, their labor backbreaking, and their lives isolated from the cultural and social vibrancy of the city. Perhaps the most harrowing existence awaited those sent to the mines. These slaves, stripped of even the barest comforts, worked in dark, suffocating conditions, chipping away at stone and extracting precious metals. The mines were a place of no return for most, their bodies broken long before their spirits could rebel. Yet even among the enslaved, resilience found a foothold. Prisoners communicated through songs, whispers, and the occasional act of defiance that affirmed their humanity. Resistance was a constant, albeit perilous, thread in the tapestry of slavery. Not all rebellions took the dramatic form of Spartacus's uprising, which shook Rome to its core and remains the most famous slave revolt in history. For most, resistance was quieter but no less significant. From sabotaging equipment to feigning illness, slaves found ways to disrupt their oppressors' control. Some fled, risking death for a chance at freedom. Those who succeeded often found refuge in the dense forests or among sympathetic communities at Rome's fringes. manumission offered another path to freedom, though it was fraught with complexities. A master might free a slave as a reward for loyalty, or a slave could purchase their freedom through years of diligent labor and saving. The freedmen and freedwomen, liberty and libertini, occupied a unique and often precarious position in Roman society. Though no longer enslaved, their status remained below that of freeborn citizens. Still, manumission represented a glimmer of hope, a tangible possibility of reshaping one's destiny. Freed individuals often worked tirelessly to secure a future for their children, who could fully integrate into Roman society as citizens. The relationship between slaves and their owners was as complex as it was unequal. Roman law viewed slaves as property, devoid of legal personhood, yet many owners depended on their slaves in intimate and essential ways. A household's success often hinged on the skills and diligence of its enslaved members. This dynamic created a paradox where, despite their subjugation, slaves wielded a quiet influence over the lives of their masters. The evidence of this can be found in the inscriptions left behind by freedmen, words of gratitude or defiance etched into stone, reminding us that even in bondage, individuals sought ways to assert their identity. Slavery permeated every aspect of Roman life, from the political to the personal. Slaves constructed the aqueducts that carried water into the city and the roads that stretched across the empire. They served in households, temples, and workshops, filling roles as varied as musicians, doctors, scribes, and entertainers. Their labor allowed the elite to live lives of leisure and luxury, their contributions woven into the fabric of Roman achievements. Yet the humanity of slaves often broke through the barriers of their oppression. In moments of unexpected connection, a lullaby sung to a master's child, a shared joke in the kitchen, slaves and owners glimpsed each other as more than roles. These fleeting moments did not erase the systemic cruelty of slavery, but underscored its contradictions. A society that prized discipline and order depended on the forced labor of individuals who had every reason to disrupt it. As the empire expanded, the demand for slaves grew, and with it, the mechanisms of their subjugation. But the very reliance on slavery sowed the seeds of its own vulnerabilities. Economic shifts, coupled with the moral questioning of slavery by some philosophers and religious groups, began to challenge its entrenched status. The spread of Christianity, with its emphasis on spiritual equality, offered a counterpoint to the rigid hierarchies of Roman society. While these changes did not dismantle slavery, they marked the beginning of a broader conversation about freedom and human dignity that would echo through the ages. To explore the lives of Roman slaves is to confront both the depths of human cruelty and the enduring capacity for hope and resistance. Their stories, often hidden in the margins of history, reveal the paradoxes of a society that celebrated liberty yet thrived on bondage. The legacy of slavery in Rome is not just a testament to the resilience of the enslaved, but also a mirror reflecting the complexities of power, dependence, and humanity. As we move from the lives of the poor in Rome's bustling streets to the invisible toil of its enslaved population, we begin to see the intricate web of relationships that sustain the empire. Each thread, no matter how humble or hidden, contributed to the whole, shaping a civilization whose echoes still resonate today. In the city of Rome, much of life unfolded in public spaces, forums bustling with political debates, marketplaces alive with commerce, and amphitheaters echoing with cheers for gladiatorial games. Yet beyond these public spectacles lay a quieter but equally vital realm, the world of Roman women. Their lives, largely lived in the shadows of historical accounts dominated by men, reveal a society both rigid in its hierarchies and complex in its dependencies. From aristocratic matrony to humble plebeian women, the roles of Roman women were as varied as the empire itself. Their stories illuminate the often unseen labor, influence, and resilience that sustained Roman society. For many Roman women, life began with the weight of expectation. Girls born into elite families were swiftly immersed in the world of domestic duties and social propriety, their futures mapped out through advantageous marriages. These unions were rarely romantic. They were transactions designed to secure alliances, wealth, or status. A young girl, often in her early teens, might find herself married to a man decades her senior, tasked with producing heirs to perpetuate her husband's lineage. Yet even within these confines, women found ways to wield influence. The materfamilias, or head of the household, held significant sway within the domestic sphere, managing the household's finances, directing slaves, and ensuring the smooth running of daily life. In more modest households, the life of a woman was no less demanding. Plebeian women often worked alongside their husbands or independently to contribute to the family's livelihood. They might run small shops, sell goods in the markets, or engage in trades such as weaving or midwifery. These women inhabited a precarious world, their labor indispensable but rarely acknowledged. Archaeological findings, such as shopfronts with living quarters above, offer glimpses into their dual roles as workers and caregivers. Graffiti from Pompeii even hints at their humor and aspirations, with messages left behind by women who lived vibrant, if hard, lives. The work of women extended beyond the economic sphere and into the intimate realm of childbirth and motherhood. Roman society placed immense value on motherhood, viewing it as both a duty and a virtue. Yet childbirth was fraught with danger. Without the benefits of modern medicine, complications were common and maternal mortality rates were high. Midwives, often older women with years of experience, played crucial roles in assisting births and caring for new mothers. Their expertise, though seldom recorded, was an invaluable lifeline in a world where the act of giving life was perilously close to death. Beyond the family and workplace, women also found roles in religion and public life, albeit within limits set by a patriarchal system. Aristocratic women might serve as priestesses, such as the Vestal Virgins, who were tasked with maintaining the sacred fire of Vesta and ensuring Rome's spiritual well-being. These women, sworn to chastity, occupied a unique space in Roman society, enjoying privileges and respect that contrasted sharply with the restrictions placed on other women. Meanwhile, ordinary women participated in local religious festivals and cults, offering prayers and sacrifices to household gods or communal deities. These rituals provided a sense of agency and connection, allowing women to engage with the divine on their own terms. Yet Roman women were not passive figures. They navigated and, at times, pushed against the boundaries imposed upon them. Historical accounts, though filtered through the perspectives of male writers, reveal women who were politically astute and occasionally subversive. Figures like Fulvia, who took up arms to defend her political interests, or Hortensia, who eloquently argued against unfair taxation in the Roman Forum, demonstrate the capacity of women to influence the public sphere when opportunities arose. These exceptions, however, only highlight the constraints faced by the majority, whose voices remain largely absent from the historical record. The legal standing of women in Rome further reflected the tension between their societal contributions and the limitations placed upon them. Women were legally considered under the guardianship of a male relative, their father, husband, or a designated guardian throughout their lives. This dependency, codified in Roman law, restricted their ability to own property, make contracts, or represent themselves in court. However, legal restrictions did not entirely stifle their agency. Wealthy widows, freed from the control of a husband or father, could and often did manage their own estates, engage in philanthropy, and wield considerable influence within their communities. Among the lower classes, the boundaries of propriety were less rigid, and necessity often dictated a woman's role. Plebeian women and freedwomen took on professions that ranged from respectable to stigmatized, including roles as seamstresses, bakers, and tavern keepers. Others, driven by desperation or lack of choice, found themselves in the world of prostitution, a profession both reviled and regulated in Roman society. These women, too, were part of the fabric of Rome, their lives a testament to survival in a society that often left them with few options. The complexity of Roman women's lives is perhaps best captured in the material remnants they left behind. Inscriptions, epitaphs, and household artifacts provide fragments of their stories. A tombstone might commemorate a beloved wife as frugi femina, a frugal woman, or highlight her dedication to family. These tributes, though formulaic, reveal the values and virtues celebrated in Roman women, as well as the deep personal connections that shaped their lives. Women in Rome, whether laboring in the shadows or standing momentarily in the light, were indispensable to the empire's functioning and continuity. They bore children who would become soldiers, farmers, and citizens. They managed households, contributed to the economy, and upheld traditions that bound society together. Though often overshadowed by the exploits of men, their stories offer a fuller, richer understanding of Roman life. As we move forward, the narrative of Rome's forgotten majority will continue to unfold. From the laborers who built its infrastructure to the traders who fueled its economy, each chapter reveals another facet of the empire's hidden foundation. The women of Rome, resilient and resourceful, remind us that history is not solely the story of the powerful but also of those who persevered in the margins, shaping their world in ways both seen and unseen. The Roman Forum, a vast open space framed by grand temples and public buildings, was the political and ceremonial heart of the empire. Yet, a different kind of energy surged through its streets and squares each day, as merchants and traders transformed the space into a bustling marketplace. The hum of negotiations, the clink of coins, and the fragrant wafts of exotic goods created a vivid tapestry of commerce. These merchants, ranging from wealthy traders to humble peddlers, were the lifeblood of Rome's economy, connecting the empire's vast provinces to its teeming urban center. Rome's markets were an extraordinary blend of the local and the global, reflecting the city's reach and its reliance on the labor and resources of countless individuals. Merchants in togas mingled with foreign traders speaking a myriad of languages. Stalls offered goods as varied as Egyptian papyrus, Indian spices, Gallic wine, and Spanish olive oil. This cosmopolitan mix not only enriched the city's economy but also its culture, introducing Romans to a world far beyond the city's walls. For the non-elite merchants who made their living in these markets, life was a relentless hustle. Unlike the elite patricians, whose wealth came from vast estates or political influence, these traders relied on their wits, hard work, and often a bit of luck. The daily routines of market life demanded resilience. Before dawn, vendors would arrive at their stalls, setting up their wares in preparation for the morning crowds. The first customers were often housewives or slaves sent to purchase daily provisions, their negotiations sharpening as the sun climbed higher in the sky. Central to the economic life of Rome were its marketplaces, such as the Macelum, the main food market, where butchers' shops stood alongside fishmongers and fruit vendors. Here, the staples of the Roman diet, grain, olives, and wine, were bought and sold, alongside more luxurious items like honey and garum, the ubiquitous fermented fish sauce. The crowded stalls were noisy and vibrant, with hawkers shouting to attract buyers and customers haggling for better prices. Beyond food, other markets specialized in textiles, pottery, and tools, catering to the needs of artisans, laborers, and the urban poor. While the markets were lively hubs of trade, they were also a microcosm of the social inequalities that defined Rome. Wealthier merchants, able to invest in larger quantities of goods or more exotic imports, occupied prime stalls in prominent locations. They could afford to pay the fees required for these spaces and were often well-connected, giving them access to the best supplies. By contrast, smaller traders and peddlers, many of whom were freedmen or even slaves working to buy their freedom, operated on the margins. They roamed the streets or set up makeshift stalls wherever space allowed, vying for attention amid the chaos. Trade routes were the arteries that fed Rome's insatiable appetite for goods. The empire's engineers built an extensive network of roads, enabling merchants to transport goods efficiently. Overland trade routes brought wool from Britain and timber from Germania, while maritime routes carried silks from the east and spices from India. The Mediterranean Sea, often referred to as Mare Nostrum, our sea, was the empire's economic lifeline, connecting far-flung provinces to the capital. Ships laden with cargo docked at the port of Ostia, where longshoremen unloaded goods that would soon find their way to Rome's markets. For many merchants, trade was more than a livelihood. It was a game of strategy and risk. A sudden storm could sink a cargo ship, wiping out a trader's investment. Likewise, pirates, though largely suppressed by Rome's naval forces, remained a threat to maritime trade. Merchants had to navigate fluctuating demand, unpredictable supply chains, and the caprices of Roman law, which often favored the elite. Despite these challenges, the rewards could be great. Successful traders could amass significant wealth, rising through the ranks of society and leaving a legacy that extended beyond their lifetimes. While the markets and trade routes illustrate the economic engine of Rome, they also reveal the human stories behind the empire's prosperity. Consider the grain merchants who ensured that Rome's population, dependent on the annona, the state's grain dole, was fed. For these merchants, failure was not an option. Grain shortages could spark riots as the city's poor, unable to afford alternative food sources, relied on the steady supply of this staple. Inscriptions and graffiti left by these traders hint at the pressures they faced and the pride they took in their work. Beyond the markets, Rome's economy was sustained by countless small businesses. Taverns and bakeries, often family-run, dotted the city's neighborhoods, serving as both economic and social hubs. These establishments provided affordable meals and simple comforts to Rome's working class. The tavern keeper, a figure both respected and ridiculed, was an essential part of urban life, mediating disputes and extending credit to trusted patrons. Women also played a notable role in Rome's economic life, particularly in the marketplace. While Roman society was patriarchal, many women managed stalls or small businesses, contributing to their family's income. Inscriptions commemorate women as cloth merchants, fishmongers, and bakers, highlighting their integral presence in the commercial sphere. Their work, though often overshadowed by their male counterparts, was vital to the city's economy and underscored the diversity of roles women could occupy within the constraints of Roman society. The vibrancy of Rome's markets was not limited to the exchange of goods. These spaces were also centers of cultural interaction and community life. Foreign merchants brought not only products, but also traditions, stories, and innovations. The markets became places where ideas mingled alongside goods, shaping the cosmopolitan character of the city. Festivals often spilled into these spaces, blending commerce with celebration and reinforcing the social fabric that held the diverse population of Rome together. As we move from the realm of merchants and marketplaces to explore other facets of Rome's untold history, the economic heartbeat of the city reminds us of the interconnectedness of its people. The bustling markets, the ships docking at Ostia, and the traders braving distant lands were all part of a larger story of resilience, ambition, and human endeavor. In the next chapter, we will delve into the spiritual lives of Rome's common people, uncovering how their beliefs and rituals shaped their world and provided solace in an empire defined by constant change. As the sun rose over Rome, its golden light kissed the domes of temples and the smoke spiraling up from household altars. Religion was everywhere, not confined to the grand spaces of the Forum or the gilded temples of Jupiter and Mars. It thrived in the cluttered tenements of the poor, the bustling marketplaces, and the quiet rural hamlets. For the common people, faith was not a lofty abstraction but a living, breathing force, a means of understanding the world, navigating life's challenges, and seeking solace amid the uncertainties of existence. Unlike the structured state ceremonies overseen by the patrician elite, the spiritual practices of Rome's non-elite population were deeply personal and incredibly diverse. Local gods, household spirits, and mystery cults provided avenues for ordinary people to engage with the divine. Their beliefs were as practical as they were profound, reflecting a world where the sacred and the mundane intertwined seamlessly. At the heart of many Roman homes stood the lararium, a small shrine dedicated to the lares, household gods, and the penates, guardians of the pantry. These deities, unique to each family, were believed to watch over the household's prosperity and safety. Each morning, a family member, often the mother or an elder, would light a small flame and offer food, wine, or incense to the spirits. These rituals, though simple, were laden with meaning. They were acts of gratitude and protection, binding the family to their spiritual roots and providing a sense of continuity amid the chaos of urban life. Beyond the domestic sphere, the city itself teemed with religious activity. Street-side shrines, festooned with flowers and offerings, honored genii loci, the spirits of specific places. Bakers might offer a portion of their bread to Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, while sailors preparing to depart from Ostia's busy port would pray to Neptune for calm seas. In times of personal or communal crisis, the people turned to these deities with fervent prayers, hoping for guidance or intervention. Among the most intriguing aspects of common Roman spirituality was the proliferation of mystery cults. These secretive, initiatory religions offered a deeply personal connection to the divine and promised spiritual rewards that transcended the material world. For many ordinary Romans, the allure of these cults lay in their promise of salvation, rebirth, or a more direct relationship with the gods. The cult of Mithras, for example, was particularly popular among soldiers and lower-class men. Its rituals, performed in underground sanctuaries called Mithraea, involved symbolic acts of sacrifice and purification, fostering a sense of camaraderie and spiritual purpose among its initiates. Women, too, found solace and community in these cults. The worship of Isis, an Egyptian goddess whose influence spread throughout the Roman world, was especially appealing. Isis embodied maternal love, healing, and protection, offering her devotees, many of them women, a sense of empowerment in a society that often limited their agency. Temples dedicated to Isis became spaces where women could pray, socialize, and participate in sacred rituals, creating a spiritual sisterhood that transcended social boundaries. While structured worship and mystery cults offered frameworks for spiritual expression, the common people also embraced a rich tapestry of folk beliefs and superstitions. Omens and divinations were woven into the fabric of daily life. A bird flying in a particular direction, a peculiar dream, or the arrangement of entrails during an animal sacrifice could all be interpreted as signs from the divine. Fortune tellers and soothsayers, often found in the marketplaces or at street corners, catered to the insatiable human desire to glimpse the future. Their predictions might be vague or contradictory, but they offered comfort in their own way, providing the illusion of control in an unpredictable world. Festivals, too, played a central role in the religious lives of the common people. These public celebrations blurred the lines between sacred ritual and communal festivity, offering a reprieve from the grind of daily life. The Saturnalia, a festival honoring Saturn, was especially beloved. For a few days each December, social hierarchies were upended. Slaves dined alongside their masters, gifts were exchanged, and the streets filled with revelry. Such moments of collective joy reminded Romans of the cyclical nature of time and the enduring hope of renewal. The spirituality of Rome's non-elite population was not without its tensions and contradictions. While some sought solace in the protective embrace of their household gods or the ecstatic rituals of mystery cults, others harbored skepticism. Satirical poets like Juvenal mocked the gullibility of the masses, deriding their belief in charms, talismans, and fraudulent priests. Yet these criticisms often came from a place of privilege, dismissing practices that were deeply meaningful to those who had little else to rely on. the arrival of Christianity in the Roman world added yet another dimension to the spiritual landscape. In its early days, Christianity appealed primarily to the lower classes and marginalized groups, offering a vision of spiritual equality and eternal salvation. Unlike traditional Roman religions, which often required costly sacrifices and elaborate rituals, Christianity emphasized personal faith and communal worship. This inclusivity, coupled with its message of hope, resonated with many who felt alienated by the rigid hierarchies of Roman society. Though initially persecuted, the Christian faith would eventually reshape the spiritual identity of the empire, absorbing and transforming many of the practices that had once defined Roman religion. The faith and rituals of the common people were the glue that held their communities together, providing solace in times of grief, purpose in moments of uncertainty, and joy in shared celebration. Their spirituality was a testament to human resilience, adapting to the shifting tides of history while preserving a deep connection to the divine. Through their prayers and offerings, the forgotten majority of Rome carved out spaces of hope and meaning, even in the shadow of an empire that often overlooked their voices. As we leave the sacred spaces of Rome's non-elite and step into the arenas and theaters of the next chapter, we see how public entertainment provided not just diversion, but also a stage where the hopes, fears, and identities of Rome's people played out. The spirituality of the common people, however humble, laid the groundwork for the cultural and communal cohesion that would be reflected in the spectacle of Rome's public life. The streets of Rome were rarely quiet. Amid the hum of everyday life, punctuated by the cries of vendors and the shuffle of sandals on stone, another sound could often be heard, a roar of excitement swelling from the city's grand arenas and circuses. These spaces, vast and teeming with life, were the beating heart of Roman entertainment. From the blood-streaked sands of the Colosseum to the chariot-racing track of the Circus Maximus, Rome's public spectacles provided not just diversion but also a sense of identity and belonging for its citizens. For the common people, these events offered a rare taste of grandeur and a powerful reminder of their connection to the empire's might. Public entertainment in Rome was as much a political instrument as it was a cultural phenomenon. The phrase panem et circenses, bread and circuses, coined by the poet Juvenal, captures the essence of how Rome's leaders maintained order and appeased the masses. By providing free grain and organizing grand spectacles, emperors and politicians sought to secure the loyalty and goodwill of the plebeians. Yet, the allure of these events went beyond mere distraction. They were a stage upon which Rome's social hierarchies were both affirmed and temporarily suspended, offering a glimpse of unity in a society deeply divided by class. At the heart of this entertainment empire was the Colosseum, an architectural marvel and a symbol of Roman power. Officially named the Flavian Amphitheater, it was capable of holding up to 50,000 spectators, from senators seated in the best spots to the urban poor packed into the higher tiers. The games held there, known as munera, were a brutal blend of spectacle and sport. Gladiators, often slaves or prisoners of war, fought for survival and glory, their clashes eliciting cheers, gasps, and wagers from the crowd. The games were meticulously planned, with mornings often reserved for wild animal hunts and afternoons featuring combat that escalated in intensity. For the spectators, these events were more than just entertainment. They were communal experiences that blurred the lines between social classes. As the crowd roared in unison, cheering for a victorious gladiator or gasping at a particularly savage blow, the divisions of wealth and status momentarily faded. Yet, the games also reinforced the power dynamics of Roman society. The emperor, seated in a place of honor, presided over the proceedings like a god, his gestures, a raised thumb or a turned hand, determining the fate of the defeated. The spectacle of life and death in the arena was a reminder of the state's authority, a theatrical display of control that extended far beyond the walls of the amphitheater. If the Colosseum epitomized the visceral thrill of combat, the Circus Maximus represented a different kind of spectacle, the chariot race. This sprawling arena, capable of holding upwards of 150,000 spectators, was the largest entertainment venue in Rome. Here, the thunder of hooves and the roar of the crowd created a palpable energy, as charioteers representing different factions competed for victory. These factions, distinguished by their colors, red, white, blue, and green, inspired fierce loyalty among their supporters. Rivalries often escalated beyond the track, leading to riots and clashes in the streets. Chariot racing was not merely a sport but a microcosm of Roman society. The drivers, many of whom were slaves or freedmen, could achieve immense fame and fortune if they excelled. Their successes became the stuff of legend, celebrated in graffiti, poetry, and even funerary inscriptions. For the spectators, the races were a chance to engage passionately with their chosen faction, to cheer, jeer, and gamble. The Circus Maximus, like the Colosseum, was a place where Romans of all classes could gather, their shared excitement temporarily bridging the chasm between rich and poor. Theaters also played a crucial role in the cultural life of Rome, offering a different kind of entertainment. While less raucous than the arenas and circuses, Roman theaters provided a stage for comedies, tragedies, and pantomimes that reflected and parodied the society in which they were performed. Playwrights like Plautus and Terence entertained audiences with clever wordplay and farcical scenarios, often drawing from the lives of ordinary Romans. The themes of these plays, love, deception, and social ambition, resonated with audiences across the social spectrum, making the theater a space of shared cultural engagement. For the urban poor, these public spectacles were a respite from the hardships of daily life. The promise of free entertainment and the thrill of the events offered moments of joy and escape. Yet, these spectacles were not without their critics. Philosophers like Seneca decried the gladiatorial games as morally corrupt and dehumanizing, while others lamented the superficiality of the masses' obsession with spectacle. Such criticisms, however, did little to diminish the popularity of these events, which remained central to Roman identity for centuries. Behind the grandeur of the games and performances lay a vast network of labor and organization. Slaves and freedmen constructed and maintained the venues, from the sand-strewn floors of the Colosseum to the intricate stage mechanisms of the theaters. Animal handlers, costume makers, and trainers worked tirelessly to ensure the spectacles ran smoothly. This hidden workforce, though largely invisible to history, was essential to the success of Rome's entertainment machine, a reminder of the interconnected lives that sustained the empire's splendor. Public entertainment in Rome was more than a diversion. It was a reflection of the empire itself. It showcased Rome's wealth, ingenuity, and ability to command the loyalty of its people. Yet, it also revealed the tensions and contradictions of Roman society, the coexistence of opulence and poverty, unity and division, celebration and exploitation. For the common people, these spectacles were a source of pride and pleasure, a reminder of their place in the grand tapestry of the empire. As we leave the arenas and theaters behind, the narrative shifts to the stories of those who resisted the empire's authority. The rebels and resistors of Rome, often drawn from the very classes who filled its entertainment venues, offer a counterpoint to the unity of the spectacle, revealing the fractures that lay beneath Rome's surface. Amid the grandeur of Roman monuments and the roar of its amphitheaters, there were whispers of dissent. Beneath the polished facade of an empire that spanned continents lay the simmering tensions of discontent, rebellion, and resistance. While the spectacles of gladiatorial games and chariot races sought to unite the populace in a shared identity, not all were content to accept their place in Rome's intricate social order. From the defiant cries of enslaved gladiators to the quiet acts of sabotage by the oppressed, resistance against the empire's machinery was a thread woven throughout its history. Nowhere is this resistance more famously embodied than in the story of Spartacus, a name that echoes through the centuries as a symbol of defiance. Born in Thrace and conscripted into the Roman army, Spartacus's fate took a darker turn when he was captured and sold into slavery. Trained as a gladiator in Capua, he became part of a system that treated human lives as tools for entertainment and profit. Yet, Spartacus's spirit was unbroken. In 73 BCE, he and a small group of fellow gladiators staged a daring escape, seizing weapons and igniting a rebellion that would terrify Rome. What began as a localized insurrection quickly swelled into a movement. Enslaved people from across the countryside flocked to Spartacus's cause, their numbers growing into the tens of thousands. This was more than a revolt. It was a challenge to the very foundations of Roman society. Spartacus's army, though ragtag and poorly equipped compared to Rome's legions, achieved astonishing victories, defeating multiple Roman forces and proving that even the mighty empire could be shaken. For 2 years they roamed Italy, their banner a beacon of hope for the oppressed and a harbinger of chaos for the elite. Ultimately, Spartacus's rebellion was crushed, and its participants faced brutal reprisals. Thousands were crucified along the Appian Way as a grim warning. Yet, the rebellion left an indelible mark, a testament to the courage and desperation of those who dared to fight for freedom. Resistance in Rome was not confined to grand revolts. It also found expression in the quieter, subtler acts of defiance that punctuated daily life. Enslaved individuals sabotaged their master's property, feigned illness, or slowed their work. These acts of passive resistance, though small in scale, collectively disrupted the smooth functioning of the empire. Urban plebeians, too, found ways to voice their dissatisfaction. Riots over food shortages, unfair taxation, or political corruption erupted periodically, turning the streets of Rome into battlegrounds. These uprisings were not always coordinated, but they conveyed a powerful message. The people would not remain silent in the face of injustice. One of the most dramatic episodes of urban resistance occurred in 133 BCE, when the populist tribune Tiberius Gracchus attempted to implement land reforms that would benefit Rome's poor. His efforts were met with fierce opposition from the Senate, culminating in his assassination during a public riot. This violent clash was a harbinger of the social and political turmoil that would plague the late Republic, as the plebeians demanded greater representation and fairness in the distribution of resources. In the provinces, resistance often took the form of armed uprisings against Roman occupation. The Jewish revolts in Judea, for example, were fueled by a combination of religious persecution, heavy taxation, and the desire for self-determination. The First Jewish-Roman War, 66–73 C, saw the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, a traumatic event that still resonates in history. Despite the brutal suppression of these uprisings, they demonstrated the limits of Rome's power and the enduring spirit of those who resisted. Resistance was not always violent. Intellectual and cultural defiance also played a role in challenging Rome's authority. The writings of Seneca, though penned from within the empire's upper echelons, often critiqued the moral decay of Roman society and the excesses of its rulers. Meanwhile, in occupied territories, local traditions and languages persisted, preserving a sense of identity in the face of assimilation. This quiet cultural resistance ensured that, even as Rome sought to impose its norms, the diversity of its empire remained intact. Women, too, participated in acts of resistance, though their contributions are often overlooked. Boudica, the queen of the Iceni tribe in Britain, led one of the most famous revolts against Roman rule. After suffering grievous personal losses at the hands of the Romans, Boudica united various tribes in a fierce campaign that saw cities sacked and Roman forces routed. Though ultimately defeated, her rebellion became a potent symbol of defiance, inspiring stories of courage and resilience for generations. Acts of resistance also permeated the cultural sphere. Graffiti scrawled on walls in Pompeii and other Roman cities often contained subversive or satirical messages, mocking the elite or voicing grievances. These ephemeral expressions, preserved by the volcanic ash of Vesuvius, offer a glimpse into the thoughts and frustrations of ordinary Romans. They remind us that resistance could be as simple as a few rebellious words etched into stone. The stories of Rome's rebels and resistors are as varied as the empire itself. They encompass the desperate bravery of Spartacus's army, the calculated defiance of intellectuals, the communal anger of rioting plebeians, and the enduring spirit of conquered peoples. Together, they paint a picture of an empire that, despite its vast power, was never unassailable. These acts of defiance, whether grand or humble, reveal the humanity of those who lived under Rome's shadow, their hopes, their fears, and their determination to assert their dignity in the face of oppression. As the dust of rebellion settles, the next chapter will shift focus to those whose labor shaped the physical fabric of Rome. From stonemasons to blacksmiths, the artisans and engineers of the empire created the infrastructure and monuments that still stand today, a testament to their skill and ingenuity. But even in their craftsmanship, echoes of resistance and resilience can be found, reminding us that every stone in Rome's foundation tells a story. Rome was not forged in the halls of the Senate or the palaces of its emperors, but by the hands of those who toiled in obscurity. The artisans, builders, and engineers of the empire, its hidden workers, crafted the aqueducts that carried water to its cities, the roads that stretched across continents, and the monuments that proclaimed its power. These individuals, often overlooked in the grand narratives of history, were the foundation of Rome's achievements, their labor immortalized in the stones and structures that still stand today. After the dust of rebellion settled, as explored in the previous chapter, Rome's hidden workers often found themselves tasked with repairing the damage of uprisings and natural calamities. But their contributions went far beyond restoration. They were the creators of new visions, transforming raw materials into functional beauty and engineering feats that pushed the boundaries of what was thought possible. For them, each project was more than work. It was a legacy etched into the bones of the empire. The life of an artisan or builder in ancient Rome was one of rigorous discipline and skilled labor. From the stonemasons shaping blocks of travertine to the carpenters constructing scaffolding and frameworks, these craftsmen formed a diverse and essential workforce. While some were free citizens or freedmen working in guilds, many were enslaved laborers, their expertise honed under conditions of servitude. Regardless of their status, their output shaped the landscape of Rome and its provinces. Take, for instance, the aqueducts, which were marvels of engineering precision. Designed to carry water over vast distances, these structures relied on the ingenuity of surveyors, engineers, and masons. The Aqua Claudia and Aqua Marcia, two of Rome's most famous aqueducts, stretched for miles, their graceful arches a testament to the labor that went into their construction. The workforce, often composed of conscripted laborers and slaves, worked tirelessly to ensure that the city's growing population had access to clean water, a necessity for both public health and the grandeur of Rome's baths and fountains. The construction of public buildings and monuments was another domain where these hidden workers left their mark. The Colosseum, Rome's iconic amphitheater, was built using concrete, a revolutionary material at the time. Layers of volcanic ash and lime created a substance both durable and flexible, enabling the construction of vast, complex structures. This innovation was the result of experimentation and craftsmanship, with teams of builders perfecting techniques that would influence architecture for centuries. Blacksmiths and metalworkers played an equally vital role, producing the tools and components needed for construction, as well as everyday items. Their forges burned day and night, transforming raw iron into chisels, nails, and hinges. For many of these workers, their labor was as much an art as a trade. Inscriptions and archaeological finds reveal the pride they took in their craft, with some even signing their work, leaving behind echoes of their individual contributions. Private spaces, too, bore the touch of Rome's artisans. The intricate mosaics that adorned villas and bathhouses were the work of skilled mosaicists, who painstakingly arranged thousands of tiny tiles to create scenes of myth and daily life. These mosaics were not just decoration. They were statements of identity and status, commissioned by patrons to showcase their wealth and taste. Each piece of colored stone or glass was a fragment of a larger story, telling tales of gods, heroes, and the natural world. Despite their essential role in building the empire's physical and cultural infrastructure, the lives of these workers were often precarious. For enslaved laborers, the burden of their status meant long hours under harsh conditions, with little to show for their efforts beyond the survival of another day. Even free artisans and builders faced challenges, competing for commissions and navigating the whims of patrons who could make or break their livelihoods. Guilds provided some measure of stability, offering support networks and a sense of community, but they could not shield their members from the uncertainties of the broader economy. The builders of Rome's roads, another cornerstone of its empire, exemplified the arduous nature of this work. The Via Appia, often called the Queen of Roads, stretched from Rome to Brindisi, its carefully laid stones creating a durable pathway for commerce and conquest. The process of constructing such roads involved surveying the terrain, excavating earth, and laying a foundation of stones, all tasks that required coordination and physical endurance. Yet these roads were more than mere infrastructure. They were arteries of the empire, enabling the movement of armies, goods, and ideas. Engineering ingenuity also extended to the design of Rome's cities. Urban planners and architects worked in tandem to create spaces that balanced functionality with grandeur. The Forum, the beating heart of Roman political and social life, was a masterpiece of urban design, its layout reflecting the empire's values and ambitions. Builders and engineers collaborated to construct basilicas, temples, and marketplaces, ensuring that each structure served its purpose while contributing to the city's aesthetic harmony. The contributions of these hidden workers were not limited to Rome itself. Across the provinces, their skills brought Roman architecture and infrastructure to distant lands, creating a legacy that extended far beyond the city's borders. In places like Gaul, Hispania, and Britannia, Roman roads, aqueducts, and amphitheaters became enduring symbols of the empire's reach. Yet, these structures also bore the marks of local adaptation, blending Roman techniques with regional styles and materials. This fusion of influences created a rich tapestry of architectural heritage, a testament to the interconnectedness of the empire. While the names of Rome's emperors and generals dominate historical narratives, the achievements of its artisans, builders, and engineers remind us of the countless lives that shaped its legacy. Their labor was not merely physical but intellectual and creative, demanding a mastery of materials, mathematics, and mechanics. They were the silent architects of an enduring civilization, their work a bridge between the ephemeral and the eternal. As we move forward, the story shifts to another group whose voices often went unheard, the children of Rome. Their experiences, from education to labor, reveal yet another layer of life in this complex society, offering insights into how the next generation inherited and contributed to the empire's legacy. But even in the laughter of children at play or their struggles in the classroom, echoes of Rome's hidden workers can be felt, a reminder that every brick laid and every road paved was a step toward building a world where life continued to flourish. Amid the clamor of hammers in workshops and the rhythmic chanting of builders marking time, another set of voices often intermingled, the high-pitched chatter and laughter of children. These sounds, easily overlooked, were as much a part of Rome's bustling urban symphony as the calls of street vendors or the barks of stray dogs. Children in ancient Rome lived in a world shaped by duty, education, and play, navigating a landscape that demanded much from them while offering moments of wonder. Their lives, though often silent in historical records, reveal a great deal about the structure and values of Roman society. From the moment of birth, a Roman child's life was steeped in rituals that reflected the family's hopes and anxieties. Newborns were placed at their father's feet in a symbolic act of acceptance. If the father picked up the child, it signified acknowledgement and a commitment to raise them. This moment was not guaranteed. Children born with visible deformities or into families struggling with poverty were sometimes abandoned. Those deemed unworthy might be left at crossroads or on temple steps, a practice that, while harrowing to modern sensibilities, was accepted in Rome as a harsh reality of survival. For those who were embraced into their families, infancy brought its own perils. Disease and malnutrition claimed many young lives, and only the strongest survived past their early years. Those who did were often nurtured within the family unit, where mothers, grandmothers, and enslaved caregivers played vital roles. Wealthier households employed pedagogy, educated slaves tasked with the early instruction of children. These individuals often shaped a child's moral and intellectual foundation, teaching them language, manners, and the basics of reading and writing. As children grew, their lives diverged along the lines of gender and class. For boys from elite families, formal education was the gateway to public life. They attended schools run by ludimagistry schoolmasters, where they learned to read, write, and calculate. The curriculum included the works of Homer and Virgil, providing not just literary knowledge but also lessons in Roman values such as bravery, loyalty, and piety. Rhetoric, the art of persuasive speaking, was particularly emphasized, as it was a crucial skill for those destined to pursue careers in law or politics. For girls, education was typically confined to the home. While they might learn to read and write, their training often centered on domestic skills. Spinning, weaving, and managing household finances were essential parts of a girl's upbringing, preparing her for the role of wife and mother. Despite these constraints, some women defied expectations, using their literacy and intellect to carve out unique roles within society. Historical fragments speak of women like Sulpicia, a poet whose verses offer glimpses of a life lived with wit and independence. Beyond education, work became a defining feature of many children's lives, particularly for those from lower-class families. Roman society expected children to contribute to their family's economy as soon as they were able. In rural areas, boys and girls alike helped with farming tasks, from herding animals to harvesting crops. In urban settings, children worked alongside their parents in trades or as apprentices. A blacksmith's son might spend his days learning the craft of forging, while a merchant's daughter might assist with inventory or transactions. These early experiences instilled skills and resilience, but also underscored the harsh realities of life for the underprivileged. Play, however, was not absent from a Roman child's world. Archaeological discoveries reveal toys that mirror those of today: dolls, miniature carts, spinning tops, and knucklebones used in games of chance. Children played in the streets and open spaces, engaging in imaginative games that required no more than a few pebbles or a stretch of dirt. Such moments of joy provided a brief escape from the responsibilities that awaited them as they grew older. The transition from childhood to adulthood in Rome was marked by significant rituals, most notably the coming-of-age ceremony. For boys, this meant donning the toga virilis, toga of manhood, in a public rite that signified their entry into the world of civic responsibilities. Girls, though denied such public ceremonies, experienced their own milestones, typically centered around marriage. These transitions were not just personal milestones, but also affirmations of a family's place within Roman society, symbolizing the perpetuation of traditions and lineage. The vulnerability of children in ancient Rome was perhaps most evident in their mortality rates. Tombstones from the period reveal the heartbreak of parents who lost children to illness, accidents, or violence. Inscriptions often express grief and longing, providing rare and poignant insights into the emotional lives of Romans. One epitaph reads, "To my sweetest daughter who brought joy to our home, may the gods keep you safe in the afterlife." These words, carved into stone, echo across centuries, a testament to the universal pain of losing a child. Despite the challenges they faced, children were a vital part of Roman society, shaping its future while embodying its ideals. They carried forward the traditions of their families and communities, ensuring the continuity of a civilization that prized both innovation and heritage. Their experiences, though varied by class, gender, and geography, reveal a world that was as nurturing as it was demanding, as joyful as it was harsh. As we leave behind the voices of Rome's children, we turn to another group whose presence shaped the city's identity: the immigrants and foreigners who transformed neighborhoods, languages, and traditions. Their stories, interwoven with those of Rome's native inhabitants, reveal the rich tapestry of a city that thrived on diversity and adaptation. The streets of Rome were a cacophony of languages, a vivid testament to the city's role as the epicenter of an empire that stretched across 3 continents. Walking through its bustling neighborhoods, one might hear Greek, Egyptian, Gaulish, Aramaic, and countless other tongues, blending into a vibrant symphony of human connection. For centuries, Rome had drawn people from every corner of the known world: merchants seeking wealth, artisans in search of commissions, soldiers returning with families, and captives forced into servitude. These migrants and foreigners did more than fill the city's ranks. They transformed its culture, food, language, and traditions, creating a dynamic and ever-evolving urban tapestry. Rome's openness to migration was both a strength and a necessity. As the empire expanded, it incorporated diverse peoples and cultures, assimilating them into the fabric of Roman life. Some came willingly, drawn by the promise of opportunity, while others were brought as slaves or war captives. Regardless of how they arrived, their presence reshaped the city's neighborhoods and daily rhythms, leaving indelible marks on its identity. One of the most striking examples of this influence could be seen in the city's food culture. The Roman diet, once centered on the humble staples of grain, olives, and wine, blossomed into a cosmopolitan array of flavors thanks to its immigrant populations. Egyptian wheat filled granaries, while spices from India such as black pepper and cinnamon added exotic aromas to Roman kitchens. Greek cooks, prized for their culinary skills, introduced techniques and dishes that became staples of Roman feasts. The bustling marketplaces, already chaotic hubs of trade, became showcases of this culinary diversity, with vendors offering everything from Syrian dates to African figs. Language, too, reflected the city's diversity. Latin remained the lingua franca, but it absorbed words and expressions from other languages, reflecting the multicultural nature of Roman life. Greek, in particular, held a special status, spoken widely by the educated elite, and used in philosophy, medicine, and the arts. In the neighborhoods of immigrants, however, native tongues persisted, preserving cultural identities even as they blended with Roman customs. This linguistic interplay created a living mosaic, each word and phrase a thread in the city's complex cultural fabric. The neighborhoods of Rome were physical manifestations of its melting pot. Districts like the Subura, densely packed and teeming with life, housed people from across the empire. Here, a visitor might find a Jewish synagogue adjacent to a Greek workshop, or hear the rhythmic prayers of an Egyptian cult mingling with the chants of Roman street performers. These neighborhoods were microcosms of the empire, spaces where cultures collided, merged, and sometimes clashed. Despite their proximity, the daily lives of these communities often remained distinct, with festivals, religious practices, and social gatherings serving as anchors of cultural identity. Religion was one of the most significant areas where immigrants left their mark. The Roman pantheon, while expansive, was far from rigid. As migrants brought their gods and rituals to the city, Rome's spiritual landscape grew richer and more diverse. Temples dedicated to Isis, an Egyptian goddess, attracted devotees with promises of protection and renewal, while the Persian god Mithras found a devoted following among soldiers. Jewish communities, though sometimes persecuted, maintained their synagogues and traditions, influencing Roman thought and practices in subtle but profound ways. These religious exchanges were not without tension, but they also demonstrated the city's capacity for adaptation and inclusion. The influence of immigrants extended beyond the tangible into the realm of ideas. Philosophical schools founded by Greek immigrants introduced Romans to new ways of thinking about ethics, politics, and the natural world. Artists and writers drew inspiration from the diverse stories and traditions that thrived within the city. The fusion of Greek and Roman styles in art and architecture, from statues to frescoes, was a testament to the creative synergy born of cultural interaction. Despite their contributions, immigrants and foreigners often faced challenges in navigating Roman society. Prejudice, economic hardship, and legal limitations shaped their experiences, creating barriers to full integration. Many found themselves in low-paying or physically demanding jobs, their labor vital but undervalued. Slaves, the largest group of involuntary migrants, bore the heaviest burdens, their lives marked by exploitation and uncertainty. Even freedmen and women, though granted certain rights, often struggled to achieve social mobility in a system that prioritized ancestry and wealth. Yet, within these constraints, immigrants forged communities and created opportunities. Associations, or collegia, provided social and economic networks for those far from home. These organizations offered support in times of need, facilitated connections with patrons, and preserved cultural traditions. Inscriptions and records from these collegia reveal a world of shared meals, collective worship, and mutual aid, underscoring the resilience and resourcefulness of Rome's immigrant populations. Children of immigrants often bridged the gap between cultures, embodying a hybrid identity that combined elements of their heritage with the Roman way of life. These children grew up speaking multiple languages, participating in Roman festivals while honoring their parents' traditions. They were the future of Rome, carrying forward the legacy of diversity that defined the city's character. Rome's capacity to absorb and adapt to waves of migration was a cornerstone of its strength, but it also sowed seeds of tension and conflict. In times of economic strain or political instability, immigrants were often scapegoated, their presence blamed for societal woes. Riots and crackdowns punctuated the city's history, revealing the fragility of its multicultural harmony. Despite these challenges, the contributions of migrants and foreigners endured, shaping Rome's evolution and ensuring its place as a beacon of cultural exchange. As we leave behind the bustling streets and diverse neighborhoods of Rome, the narrative shifts to the countryside, where the forgotten farmers of the empire toiled to sustain its cities. Their stories, less visible but no less vital, reveal another facet of the hidden majority that made Rome possible. As the sun rose over the rolling countryside beyond Rome's city walls, the fields awoke with life. The crack of a plow against stubborn soil, the rhythmic calls of workers guiding oxen, and the distant hum of cicadas painted a portrait of the empire's unseen backbone. While Rome's urban centers bustled with trade and politics, the rural landscape stretched vast and silent, home to the farmers who sustained the empire. These men and women, toiling under the weight of their own survival and the empire's demands, formed the majority of the population. Yet their stories, like the furrows they carved into the earth, have often been overlooked. The life of a Roman farmer was one of relentless labor, dictated by the cycles of nature and the needs of the state. Smallholders, known as coloni, worked plots of land often barely sufficient to feed their families. These plots, inherited through generations or leased from wealthy landowners, were the stage for a daily struggle against the whims of weather and the ever-present shadow of taxation. A poor harvest could mean starvation, while a bountiful one often translated into increased demands from tax collectors. Taxation was a relentless burden for Rome's rural majority. The empire's fiscal machinery extracted a significant portion of their produce, whether in grain, livestock, or other goods. This system, while crucial for sustaining the city of Rome and its legions, left little margin for the farmers themselves. Historical records describe tax collectors, often corrupt and unscrupulous, squeezing villages for every last denarius, their arrival dreaded like the onset of a storm. For many farmers, the fear of losing their land to unpaid debts was as constant as the sun's rise and fall. Despite these hardships, rural communities displayed remarkable resilience. Villages functioned as tightly knit units, with families pooling labor and resources during planting and harvest seasons. The shared tasks of threshing wheat or pressing olives became communal events, blending necessity with tradition. These moments of collaboration forged bonds that strengthened the social fabric, providing a sense of security in an otherwise precarious existence. Agriculture in Rome was both a science and an art, reflecting centuries of accumulated knowledge. The writings of authors like Cato the Elder and Varro provide detailed insights into the methods employed by farmers. Crop rotation, irrigation, and the use of manure as fertilizer were common practices, ensuring the longevity of the land. Vineyards and olive groves dotted the countryside, their fruits destined for markets in Rome and beyond. Grapes became wine, the lifeblood of Roman culture, while olives yielded oil that fueled lamps and flavored meals. Livestock also played a central role in rural life. Sheep and goats provided wool and milk, while pigs and chickens were raised for meat and eggs. Cattle, though less common, were prized for their strength in plowing fields. These animals were not merely resources. They were integral to the rhythms of the farm, their care requiring as much attention as the crops themselves. Beneath the veneer of self-reliance, however, lay a stark reality. Many farmers were not independent landowners but tenants on vast estates owned by Rome's elite. These latifundia, sprawling agricultural enterprises, operated on the labor of enslaved workers and tenant farmers alike. The consolidation of land into these estates, often through the displacement of smallholders, marked a significant shift in rural life. The latifundia's focus on cash crops like wine and olive oil catered to urban markets but left local communities vulnerable to food shortages. The plight of rural workers often mirrored that of the enslaved laborers who toiled alongside them. Enslaved individuals, drawn from Rome's conquests, became an essential part of agricultural production. Their lives were grueling, with long hours spent in the fields under the watchful eyes of overseers. Yet within this shared hardship, bonds sometimes formed between slaves and free farmers, their struggles uniting them against the inequities imposed by the wealthy landowners. Religion and tradition offered solace to the rural majority. Household shrines honored gods like Ceres, the goddess of agriculture, whose blessings were sought before planting and harvest. Festivals celebrating the cycles of the seasons provided moments of communal joy and spiritual renewal. The Ambarvalia, a festival dedicated to purifying the fields, involved processions and sacrifices, blending the sacred and the practical in a way that underscored the farmer's deep connection to the land. Rural life also intersected with Rome's broader economy through trade. Farmers brought surplus goods to local markets, where they mingled with merchants and townsfolk. These exchanges, though modest, linked the countryside to the empire's vast trade networks. A farmer's grain might end up feeding soldiers on the frontier, while his olive oil might illuminate homes in distant provinces. This interconnectedness highlighted the vital role of the rural majority in sustaining Rome's power and prosperity. Despite their contributions, the voices of Rome's farmers often went unheard in the corridors of power. Their lives were marked by a profound disconnect between their labor and the benefits it produced. The grandeur of Rome's monuments, the opulence of its feasts, and the might of its armies rested on their backs, yet they remained invisible in the annals of history. Occasional uprisings and protests, though swiftly suppressed, revealed the simmering discontent of those who bore the empire's burdens. As we leave the fields and return to the city, the narrative shifts to the challenges faced by Rome's commoners in times of disease and crisis. The next chapter explores how epidemics and public health shaped the lives of the forgotten majority, offering a stark contrast to the steady rhythms of rural life. But even as we move forward, the story of Rome's farmers lingers, a reminder of the quiet resilience that underpinned an empire. Rome, the great city of marble and empire, was no stranger to the shadow of death. Beneath its grandeur lurked vulnerabilities that no aqueduct or amphitheater could mask. Epidemics periodically swept through the bustling streets and quiet rural villages alike, reminding the empire of its fragility. For Rome's commoners, the specter of disease was an ever-present part of life, their resilience tested by each wave of illness that struck the city's crowded tenements, its rural communities, and its sprawling provinces. Diseases traveled swiftly along the very arteries that sustained the empire, its roads, trade routes, and bustling ports. What brought grain from Egypt or spices from India also carried unseen dangers, pathogens that thrived in the interconnectedness of Rome's world. Plagues arrived unannounced, cutting through the population with brutal efficiency. The Antonine Plague of the 2nd century CE, for instance, decimated the empire, killing as many as 5 million people. Though its exact nature remains uncertain, with historians debating between smallpox and measles, its impact was undeniable, disrupting trade, labor, and the delicate balance of daily life. For Rome's poorest citizens, epidemics were especially devastating. The cramped insulae where many lived were breeding grounds for contagion, their narrow alleys filled with the refuse of daily life. Fresh water, though carried into the city by the engineering marvels of aqueducts, was not equally accessible to all, leaving many reliant on contaminated wells or communal fountains. Public latrines, shared by dozens at a time, added to the unsanitary conditions. Disease in such environments spread with terrifying speed, leaving families mourning their dead and fearing for their own lives. In rural areas, where the population density was lower, the spread of disease was often slower but no less devastating. Villages dependent on collective labor for planting and harvest found themselves crippled when illness struck. A household laid low by plague risked not just hunger but the loss of its land, as tax obligations loomed regardless of the farmer's ability to pay. The countryside, often idealized in Roman literature as a haven of health and simplicity, proved just as vulnerable to the ravages of disease as the bustling city. The responses to these outbreaks reveal much about Roman society and the resilience of its people. Public health measures, though rudimentary by modern standards, were implemented with increasing urgency as the empire grew more familiar with the devastation of epidemics. Temples dedicated to healing deities like Asclepius became focal points for collective prayers and rituals, as Romans sought divine intervention to stem the tide of illness. Processions and sacrifices, while spiritual in intent, also served as acts of communal solidarity, providing a sense of agency in the face of an invisible enemy. Beyond religious rituals, practical measures were also employed. Records from the time mention attempts at quarantine, though these were inconsistent and often ineffective. Cities closed their gates to travelers from affected areas, and those with the means fled to the countryside, leaving the urban poor to fend for themselves. Physicians, trained in the traditions of Hippocrates and Galen, worked tirelessly to combat the spread of disease, though their understanding of pathogens was limited. Remedies ranged from herbal concoctions to bloodletting, their efficacy varying widely. For the common people, survival often depended on the strength of their communities. Neighbors tended to the sick when families could not, sharing food, water, and whatever remedies they believed might help. Herbalists, midwives, and other informal healers played crucial roles, their knowledge of local plants and traditional cures filling the gaps left by more formal medical practices. These unsung healers, often women, carried forward an oral tradition of care that provided hope and relief to countless sufferers. Plagues also brought profound social and economic changes. The loss of life, particularly among the working class, disrupted the labor force and created shortages in agriculture and industry. In some cases, this led to increased wages for surviving workers, as landowners and merchants competed to secure their labor. At the same time, the disruptions caused by disease exacerbated inequalities, with the wealthy better able to shield themselves from its effects. Villas in the countryside became refuges, their owners retreating to relative safety while the urban poor bore the brunt of the suffering. Religious and philosophical responses to epidemics reflected the deep existential questions these crises provoked. Christians, whose faith was still emerging during some of Rome's most devastating plagues, gained followers through their emphasis on compassion and care for the sick. Their willingness to tend to the dying, often at great personal risk, stood in stark contrast to the self-preservationist instincts of many. Pagan Romans, meanwhile, sought explanations in the wrath of the gods, interpreting epidemics as divine punishment for societal or personal failings. These differing perspectives fueled debates about morality, fate, and the nature of suffering, leaving a lasting imprint on Roman thought. As plagues receded, they left scars, not only in the lives lost but also in the memories of those who survived. Inscriptions commemorating the dead became more common, their poignant words reflecting a collective mourning that spanned all classes. Archaeological evidence, such as mass graves and changes in burial practices, provides further testimony to the scale of these tragedies. Yet, amid the sorrow, there were also signs of resilience. Communities rebuilt, fields were replanted, and the rhythms of life resumed, albeit with a heightened awareness of its fragility. The legacy of Rome's epidemics endures in the lessons they offer about human resilience and vulnerability. They remind us that even the greatest empires are not immune to the forces of nature, and that the strength of a society lies as much in its compassion and adaptability as in its monuments and armies. As the narrative shifts from the struggles against disease to the complex lives of freedmen and freeborn plebeians, the resilience of Rome's forgotten majority continues to shine through, a testament to their enduring spirit in the face of adversity. In the sprawling mosaic of Roman society, a group often overlooked yet integral to its structure lived and worked in the liminal spaces between privilege and hardship, the freeborn plebeians and the freedmen. Their stories, less chronicled than those of senators or slaves, reveal a society striving for stability amid rigid hierarchies. Together, they navigated a world where status could be both a burden and an opportunity, their lives defined by ambition, resilience, and a desire for recognition. The freeborn plebeians, citizens by birth, represented the backbone of Rome's lower social strata. Their legal rights set them apart from slaves and non-citizens, yet they often struggled to make their voices heard amid the clamor of a society dominated by the elite. Freeborn status granted them certain protections, the right to own property, vote in assemblies, and marry, but it was no guarantee of prosperity. For many plebeians, life was a relentless grind, their days consumed by labor, their nights by the pressing concerns of survival. For freedmen, the journey was markedly different. These were individuals who had escaped the bonds of slavery, either through manumission by their masters or by purchasing their freedom. Manumission was not just an act of liberation but a transformation of identity. The freedmen became a libertus, tethered in part to their former master, now their patron. This relationship, though hierarchical, offered mutual benefits. The patron gained loyalty and service, while the freedman received protection and access to the patron's network. Yet this new freedom came with limitations. Freedmen could not hold public office or ascend to the senatorial class, their past servitude a shadow that lingered over their achievements. The lives of freeborn plebeians and freedmen converged in the bustling urban centers of the empire, particularly in Rome. Here, they formed a diverse and dynamic working class. Freedmen often channeled their skills into trades or crafts, building on expertise honed during their enslavement. Bakers, cobblers, stonemasons, and shopkeepers, their enterprises filled the city's neighborhoods, contributing to its vibrant economy. The tomb of Eurysaces, a wealthy freedman who made his fortune as a baker, stands as a testament to their aspirations and accomplishments. Its frieze, depicting the stages of bread production, celebrates the dignity of labor and the pride of achievement. Freeborn plebeians, though similarly industrious, faced their own set of challenges. Many worked as laborers, porters, or street vendors, their livelihoods tied to the ebb and flow of urban life. Others sought stability in the cursus honorum, the sequence of public offices available to citizens. While the highest echelons remained out of reach, plebeians could still achieve modest political influence through roles like tribunus plebis, tribune of the plebs, advocating for the rights of their class and pushing back against the excesses of the elite. Family was a cornerstone of identity for both groups, offering a source of stability and a foundation for social advancement. Marriages, often arranged to consolidate resources or secure alliances, became strategic endeavors. For freedmen, marriage to a freeborn citizen offered their children the opportunity to transcend the limitations of their status. These unions, though not without stigma, represented a step toward integration into the broader fabric of Roman society. Religion also played a crucial role in shaping the lives of freeborn plebeians and freedmen. Freedmen, in particular, found solace and community in the worship of deities that resonated with their experiences. Temples dedicated to the Lares, household gods, or Isis, an Egyptian goddess associated with renewal and protection, became centers of spiritual and social life. The cult of Mithras, popular among laborers and soldiers, attracted followers with its promise of camaraderie and personal transformation, offering an egalitarian space where status mattered less than devotion. Economic mobility, while limited, was not impossible. The peculium, a fund that enslaved individuals could save, allowed some to buy their freedom and establish a livelihood. Freedmen who achieved financial success often became patrons themselves, creating their own networks of dependence and extending their influence within their communities. Public displays of wealth, such as elaborate funerary monuments or donations to local causes, served not only as markers of personal achievement but also as assertions of belonging. Yet, this upward mobility came with challenges. Social prejudices against freedmen persisted, their former servitude often used to discredit their success. Satirists like Juvenal mocked their ambitions, portraying them as vulgar or pretentious. These critiques, while scathing, also highlight the unease their achievements stirred among the elite, who saw their ascendancy as a threat to the established order. The resilience of freeborn plebeians and freedmen is evident in the records they left behind. Inscriptions on tombs, graffiti on walls, and dedications in temples speak of lives lived with determination and hope. One epitaph reads, "To Gaius, a freedman who rose through merit, beloved by his family and respected by his peers." These words, etched into stone, defy the anonymity that history often imposes, asserting the dignity of those who carved their place in Roman society. The interplay between freeborn citizens and freedmen also shaped the political and cultural dynamics of the empire. Their labor sustained the city, their taxes funded its spectacles, and their voices, though often muted, influenced its trajectory. Together, they bridged the gap between the extremes of Roman society, their experiences reflecting the complexities of life under the shadow of empire. As we turn to the next chapter, examining the harsh realities of crime and punishment for Rome's poor, the struggles and successes of these unseen citizens serve as a reminder of the resilience and agency of those who lived in the margins of history. Their stories, though often overshadowed, form a vital thread in the tapestry of Rome's untold majority. In the labyrinth of Rome, where the marble villas of the elite stood in sharp contrast to the tenement insulae of the poor, the concept of justice was as divided as the city itself. For the lower classes, navigating the Roman legal system was often a fraught endeavor, where the weight of law fell heaviest on those with the least power. Crime and punishment, far from being impartial, mirrored the deep inequalities of Roman society, offering a stark reflection of the empire's hierarchy. The types of crimes prevalent among Rome's poor were, unsurprisingly, those born of necessity and desperation. Theft was the most common, ranging from the petty pilfering of bread to survive another day to the more audacious acts of burglary in wealthier districts. Fraud and forgery, often involving currency or documents, also emerged as means for those in dire straits to gain a fleeting reprieve from poverty. In the densely packed urban neighborhoods, brawls and disturbances were a regular occurrence, fueled by overcrowding, scarcity, and the stresses of daily life. These offenses, though minor in the grand scheme of Roman law, were dealt with swiftly and often harshly. The legal framework of Rome, embodied in the 12 Tables and later imperial edicts, was publicly celebrated as a cornerstone of order and civilization. Yet its application was far from equitable. The rights of a citizen, even a poor one, differed markedly from those of a non-citizen or a slave. For citizens, there was at least the semblance of due process, including the right to appeal to the emperor in certain cases. Non-citizens, however, faced summary judgments, and slaves were subject to the whims of their masters, who held absolute power over their lives. Punishments in Rome were as varied as the crimes, designed to reinforce social order and deter future transgressions. For minor offenses, fines or public shaming sufficed. A thief caught in the act might be forced to repay their crime with an amount several times the stolen item's value, ensuring financial ruin for someone already struggling. Public humiliation, being paraded through the streets or whipped in the forum, was a common sentence for petty criminals, its spectacle intended as a lesson to all. More severe crimes, particularly those seen as threats to social stability, were met with brutal punishments. Execution methods ranged from the quick and efficient, such as beheading for citizens, to the excruciatingly cruel. Crucifixion, reserved for slaves and the lowest classes, served as both punishment and public warning. Its use was most famously recorded during the suppression of Spartacus's revolt, when thousands of rebel slaves were crucified along the Appian Way, their suffering displayed for all who passed by. Rome's infamous arenas also played a role in the administration of justice. Those condemned to death, often for crimes like murder or treason, might find themselves thrown to wild animals in the Colosseum. These spectacles, though ostensibly punitive, were as much about entertainment as they were about justice. The cheering crowds, drawn from all strata of society, witnessed these executions as both moral theater and a reminder of Rome's power. For the poor, access to legal representation and advocacy was rare. The orators and advocates who argued cases in Rome's courts were expensive, their services far beyond the reach of the average plebeian. In some cases, patrons, wealthy benefactors, might intervene on behalf of their clients, offering legal support as part of their broader relationship. However, this dependency underscored the imbalance of power, as the poor's access to justice was often contingent on the goodwill of the elite. Despite these inequities, the Roman legal system was not entirely devoid of safeguards for the disadvantaged. Certain laws, such as those protecting debtors from excessive exploitation by creditors, were designed to curb abuses. The role of the tribunes of the plebs, elected representatives of the common people, provided a modicum of oversight, though their influence waned in the imperial period. Additionally, the practice of public trials where accusations were aired before an audience ensured some level of accountability, even if the scales were weighted against the accused. Religion also intersected with justice, offering a parallel system of accountability. Oaths sworn before the gods held significant weight, their violation considered a crime not just against the state but against the divine order. Temples served as sanctuaries, where fugitives could seek refuge, invoking sacred protections against their pursuers. These sanctuaries, while not inviolable, offered a temporary reprieve and underscored the deep interweaving of law and spirituality in Roman life. For all its harshness, the Roman system of crime and punishment was not solely about retribution. It also reflected broader social values and anxieties. The obsession with public order, the harsh penalties for theft and rebellion, and the spectacle of punishment all spoke to an empire keenly aware of its fragility. Rome's leaders understood that their power rested on the perception of invincibility and the maintenance of social harmony, even if that harmony was imposed through fear. The stories of those who encountered this system are as varied as the empire itself. Inscriptions and records preserve glimpses of individuals: a farmer accused of stealing grain, a freedwoman defending her rights in court, a group of laborers caught in a fight over unpaid wages. These fragments reveal not just the workings of the law but the humanity of those who lived under its shadow, their struggles, choices, and resilience. As we leave behind the tribunals and forums, the narrative turns to another facet of Rome's hidden majority: their daily sustenance. The next chapter delves into the food of the forgotten, exploring the diets, markets, and communal rituals that sustain the empire's masses, offering a stark contrast to the harsh realities of justice we have just explored. The aroma of freshly baked bread filled the narrow streets of Rome, mingling with the pungent scent of salted fish and the earthy tang of wine. These smells, carried on the city's constant breeze, spoke of a culinary world that sustained its teeming masses. For the common people of Rome, food was not merely sustenance but a reflection of their daily struggles, aspirations, and the culture they helped to shape. While the elite feasted on delicacies from across the empire, the majority relied on humble staples, their meals shaped by necessity and ingenuity. Grain was the cornerstone of the Roman diet, a reality that bound the lower classes together in their shared dependence on this essential crop. Wheat, barley, and spelt formed the foundation of meals for plebeians, slaves, and rural laborers alike. The state-recognized importance of grain was evident in the annona, the grain dole provided to eligible citizens. This program, established to prevent riots and ensure stability, distributed free or heavily subsidized grain to the urban poor. For those receiving the dole, this allocation meant survival in a city where the cost of living often exceeded the means of its working class. The simplest and most ubiquitous product of grain was bread. Baked in communal ovens that dotted Rome's neighborhoods, bread was both a staple and a social equalizer. Bakers, often freedmen or immigrants, were vital figures in the community, their labor providing sustenance for thousands. Their shops offered varieties ranging from coarse, hearty loaves for the poor to finer, whiter breads reserved for those who could afford a higher price. Bread was often accompanied by pulse, a porridge made from barley or spelt. Cheap and filling, pulse could be enriched with vegetables, herbs, or scraps of meat when available, making it a versatile and adaptable dish. Street food was another defining feature of the Roman culinary landscape, especially for those who lacked the facilities to cook at home. Taverns and food stalls thrived in the bustling streets and markets, offering affordable meals to laborers and travelers. The thermopolia, Rome's ancient equivalent of a fast food stand, served hot dishes such as stews, lentils, and fried fish. These establishments were more than mere eateries. They were social hubs where neighbors exchanged news and gossip over shared meals. For many, a visit to the thermopolium was a daily ritual, a brief respite from the grind of work. Vegetables and legumes were essential components of the Roman poor's diet. Cabbage, leeks, onions, and turnips were cultivated in small plots or purchased at market stalls. Lentils, chickpeas, and fava beans provided much-needed protein, often prepared in hearty soups or stews. Fruits such as figs, dates, and apples offered sweetness to meals, while olives and their oil added richness. These ingredients, though humble, were the building blocks of a cuisine that prized frugality and resourcefulness. Meat was a luxury for most of Rome's commoners, consumed sparingly and often reserved for special occasions. Sausages, made from offcuts and seasoned with spices, were among the more accessible forms of meat. For those living in coastal areas or near rivers, fish and shellfish were more readily available, though they too were often out of reach for the poorest citizens. Salted fish, particularly garum, a fermented fish sauce, was a ubiquitous condiment, prized for its ability to enhance even the simplest dishes. Communal eating was central to the lives of Rome's lower classes, reinforcing bonds of family and neighborhood. Meals were often shared, with family members or neighbors contributing what they could to create a collective feast. Festivals and religious holidays offered additional opportunities for communal dining, with sacrifices providing meat that was distributed among participants. These gatherings, marked by laughter and storytelling, were moments of respite from the hardships of daily life, affirming a sense of belonging and shared identity. The disparity between the diets of the elite and the lower classes was stark, reflecting the broader inequalities of Roman society. While the rich indulged in extravagant banquets featuring exotic ingredients like peacock, dormice, and imported spices, the poor made do with what was affordable and available. Satirists like Juvenal mocked the ostentation of the elite's feasts, contrasting their excesses with the frugality of the common people. Yet, in their simplicity, the meals of Rome's majority embodied a resilience and creativity that underpinned their survival. The production and distribution of food in Rome were feats of logistical ingenuity, involving networks of farmers, merchants, and transport workers. Grain shipments from provinces like Egypt and Sicily were vital to feeding the city's population, their arrival celebrated with relief. Markets, from the Grand Forum Boreum to smaller neighborhood stalls, buzzed with activity as vendors hawked their wares. These spaces were microcosms of Rome's diversity, bringing together people from all walks of life in the shared pursuit of sustenance. Religion also influenced the culinary practices of Rome's lower classes. Offerings to household gods often included food, a gesture that linked the sacred to the everyday. Festivals dedicated to deities like Ceres, the goddess of agriculture, celebrated the harvest and reaffirmed the community's connection to the land. These rituals, steeped in tradition, underscored the importance of food as both a necessity and a symbol of prosperity. Despite their hardships, Rome's commoners left an enduring legacy in the culinary traditions that have shaped Western cuisine. The humble ingredients and techniques that defined their meals laid the groundwork for dishes still enjoyed today, from hearty stews to rustic breads. Their resilience and resourcefulness in the face of scarcity offer timeless lessons about the power of community and the art of making do. As we move from the kitchens and markets of Rome to its vast infrastructure, the next chapter explores the public works that both served and excluded its lower classes. Aqueducts, roads, and baths, though hailed as triumphs of engineering, reveal a stark divide in accessibility and benefit, shedding further light on the inequalities that defined life in the empire. Rome was not confined to its forums or opulent palaces. Its very foundation was etched into its public works, aqueducts, roads, and baths that stretched across the empire, knitting its diverse regions into a cohesive whole. These marvels of engineering proclaimed the might of Rome, their presence a promise of prosperity and civilization. Yet, beneath the surface of these impressive achievements lay a more complex story, a tale of inequality, labor, and the selective distribution of their benefits. Aqueducts were among Rome's most celebrated public works, carrying fresh water from distant springs and rivers into the heart of the city. The Aqua Claudia, an aqueduct that stretched over 40 miles, stood as a testament to Roman ingenuity and ambition. Its towering arches loomed over the countryside, a visual reminder of the empire's mastery over nature. Yet, while aqueducts symbolized progress, access to the water they delivered was far from equal. The elite, living in grand villas and homes with private cisterns, enjoyed uninterrupted access to clean water. For the urban poor, however, public fountains and communal baths were the only sources, their use governed by proximity and availability. The disparity between these groups was stark, as convenience and comfort flowed disproportionately to those who needed it least. Rome's roads, too, were both a marvel and a metaphor for the inequalities they embodied. The famed Via Appia, often called the Queen of Roads, was a vital artery connecting Rome to the southern provinces. Paved with meticulously placed stones, it allowed armies, merchants, and messages to travel efficiently across vast distances. For the empire's rulers, these roads were lifelines of control and commerce. Yet, the construction and maintenance of these thoroughfares often fell to the empire's invisible workforce, enslaved laborers, prisoners, and conscripted peasants. These workers toiled under harsh conditions, their efforts sustaining a network that primarily served the elite's interests. While farmers and traders also benefited from improved transportation, the roads often became conduits for exploitation, carrying tax collectors, soldiers, and the symbols of imperial power to even the most remote corners of the empire. Public baths, or thermae, were another cornerstone of Roman infrastructure, celebrated for their role in promoting hygiene and social cohesion. The grandest baths, such as those of Caracalla, were architectural wonders, featuring sprawling complexes of heated pools, steam rooms, and exercise areas. These spaces were open to the public, a gesture that seemed to underscore Rome's commitment to egalitarian leisure. Yet, even in the baths, divisions persisted. The elite enjoyed private rooms and exclusive hours, while the masses crowded into shared spaces, their access limited by time and affordability. The maintenance of these facilities, like so many other public works, relied on the labor of slaves and the oversight of skilled craftsmen, whose contributions went largely unacknowledged. The labor behind Rome's public works was a monumental undertaking, drawing on a vast pool of human resources. Enslaved people formed the backbone of these projects, their lives defined by backbreaking work and minimal recognition. Conscripts from rural villages, often coerced into service, faced similarly grueling conditions. For both groups, the completion of an aqueduct or a road represented not triumph but survival, their sacrifices erased from the gleaming facade of the finished structures. Inscriptions left by overseers and engineers occasionally acknowledged their teams, offering rare glimpses of humanity amid the anonymity of labor. Inequality in infrastructure extended beyond access to maintenance. The lower classes bore the brunt of the physical toil required to build and sustain Rome's public works. Enslaved workers hauled stones for aqueducts, dug trenches for roads, and cleaned the elaborate plumbing systems that fed the baths. Yet, their contribution was rarely recognized in the celebratory inscriptions that adorned these structures. Instead, the credit was claimed by emperors and elite patrons, who funded the projects and reaped the glory of their completion. The disparity in access to public works often led to tensions within Roman society. Urban poor and rural populations alike resented the unequal distribution of benefits, their frustration occasionally spilling over into riots or protests. During times of drought or disaster, the inequalities became even more pronounced, as the elite secured their resources while the lower classes were left to endure the hardships. These moments of crisis revealed the fragility of the systems that Rome prided itself on, as well as the resilience of those who lived on its margins. Despite these challenges, public works did provide a shared sense of identity and pride for many Romans. The sight of a towering aqueduct, or the bustling activity of a market connected to the empire's roads, reminded citizens of their place within a vast and powerful network. For the lower classes, these structures were not just symbols of oppression, but also of possibility, offering glimpses of a world where the fruits of empire might be more evenly shared. Religion played a role in shaping perceptions of public works, with many projects dedicated to deities or undertaken in fulfillment of vows. Temples adorned with inscriptions of gratitude often stood alongside aqueducts and roads, blending the sacred with the practical. Festivals celebrating the completion of major projects provided moments of communal joy, their rituals reinforcing the connection between public works and divine favor. The legacy of Rome's public works endures, their ruins testaments to the ingenuity and ambition of a civilization that sought to shape the natural world to its will. Yet, their history also serves as a reminder of the human cost behind these achievements. The laborers who built Rome's aqueducts, roads, and baths, anonymous and uncelebrated, were the true architects of its greatness, their contributions etched not in marble but in the daily life of an empire. As we move from the infrastructure that sustained Rome to the spiritual lives of its women, the next chapter explores the roles of priestesses, witches, and devotees. Their stories, often marginalized, offer a unique perspective on the interplay between power, gender, and belief in ancient Rome. The flickering glow of a sacred flame cast shadows on the marble walls of the Vestal sanctuary, illuminating the solemn faces of priestesses entrusted with Rome's spiritual well-being. In another part of the city, women gathered in quiet reverence at a shrine dedicated to Isis, their whispered prayers carried to the ears of an Egyptian goddess who promised renewal and protection. These moments, separated by context and status, illustrate the multifaceted roles women played in the spiritual life of Rome. From revered priestesses to marginalized practitioners of magic, women's spiritual practices reveal both the breadth of Roman religion and the spaces it carved out for female agency. At the heart of Rome's religious landscape stood the Vestal Virgins, an exclusive group of women who held one of the most prestigious and visible roles in the empire. Selected as children from elite families, Vestals committed to 30 years of service, during which they maintained the sacred fire of Vesta, goddess of the hearth. This flame was more than a symbol. It was a guarantee of Rome's safety and prosperity. The Vestals' purity, symbolized by their vow of chastity, was seen as integral to their divine duty. In return for their service, they enjoyed privileges rare for women in Rome: autonomy from male guardianship, luxurious accommodations in the city's center, and the respect of citizens who saw them as living embodiments of Rome's spiritual power. However, the Vestals' high status came with immense pressure. A failure to perform their duties, whether through negligence or perceived impurity, could result in severe punishment. Historical accounts describe the grim fate of Vestals found guilty of breaking their vows: burial alive within the city's walls, a punishment that underscored the gravity of their role. These stories, though sensational, also highlight the duality of their existence: exalted yet vulnerable, privileged yet constrained by the weight of expectation. Beyond the temples and public rituals, women's roles in religion extended into the private and communal spheres. Domestic worship centered on the household gods, the lares and penates, whose small shrines adorned kitchens and courtyards. Women, often as the managers of the household, took on the role of spiritual caretakers, offering prayers and sacrifices to ensure their family's well-being. These rituals, though modest, were deeply personal and underscored the connection between daily life and the divine. Cults dedicated to foreign deities provided another avenue for women to explore their spirituality. The worship of Isis, an Egyptian goddess whose cult spread across the Roman world, attracted women from diverse backgrounds. Isis offered maternal protection, healing, and the promise of renewal, her rituals resonating deeply with those seeking solace or empowerment. Temples to Isis became sanctuaries where women could participate as equals, their voices and actions integral to the ceremonies. Similarly, the cult of Cybele, the Magna Mater, celebrated ecstatic rituals that allowed women to transcend the constraints of their daily lives, connecting them to a divine force that embodied fertility and wild nature. Yet, not all women's spiritual practices were embraced by society. The figure of the witch, often depicted as a malevolent practitioner of magic, occupied a liminal space in Roman culture. Accusations of witchcraft could arise from personal grudges or societal fears, targeting women whose knowledge of herbs, potions, and rituals set them apart. While some witches were vilified in literature and law, others were sought after for their skills in healing and divination. This duality reflects the ambivalence of Roman attitudes toward magic, a blend of fear, fascination, and reliance. One of the most famous accounts of witchcraft comes from the poet Horace, who describes two women, Canidia and Sagana, performing a gruesome ritual in a secluded grove. Their actions, both grotesque and compelling, reveal the anxieties surrounding female power and autonomy in a patriarchal society. At the same time, they underscore the enduring human desire to control fate through supernatural means. Women's participation in religion also intersected with their social status. Elite women, through their wealth and connections, could fund temple constructions, sponsor public festivals, or serve as priestesses in prominent cults. Their visibility in these roles enhanced their families' prestige and provided them with a platform for influence. Inscriptions honoring such women highlight their contributions, offering glimpses of lives lived at the intersection of piety and power. For lower-class women, religious festivals and communal rituals provided rare opportunities for public engagement and expression. The Saturnalia, a festival marked by role reversals and revelry, allowed even the most marginalized members of society to experience moments of joy and equality. Similarly, the rites of Bona Dea, a goddess whose worship was restricted to women, created spaces where women could celebrate their shared identity away from the gaze of men. Despite their varied roles, women's spiritual lives were often shaped by the broader constraints of Roman society. Their access to religious leadership was limited, their participation frequently mediated by male priests or family members. Yet within these boundaries, they carved out spaces of agency and influence, their voices echoing in the prayers whispered at household shrines, the chants of cult initiates, and the hymns sung in temples. The legacy of women's roles in Roman religion is as complex as it is enduring. Their contributions, though often overshadowed, were integral to the spiritual and social fabric of the empire. From the sacred flame of Vesta to the hidden rituals of the Bona Dea, women's spiritual practices reveal a rich tapestry of devotion, resilience, and creativity. As the narrative transitions from the sacred to the familial, the next chapter will explore the toll of war on soldiers' families, delving into the economic struggles and emotional resilience of those left behind. This shift highlights yet another dimension of life in Rome, where the personal and the political were inextricably intertwined. The sound of boots marching to the cadence of a centurion's bark echoed through Rome's streets, a reminder of the empire's ever-present military machinery. While soldiers prepared to extend the borders of Rome or defend them against encroaching enemies, the families they left behind faced battles of their own. These struggles were not waged with swords and shields, but with resilience and resourcefulness. As wives, children, and aging parents navigated the void left by absent fathers, husbands, and sons, Rome's military campaigns were vast and unrelenting, drawing men from cities and countryside alike. For the soldiers, the promise of glory, citizenship, and land upon retirement was a potent lure. But for their families, the reality of these campaigns often meant years of uncertainty and hardship. The absence of a primary breadwinner placed immense pressure on those left behind, who had to balance economic survival with emotional endurance. In the urban centers, where many soldiers came from the lower classes, the impact of their departure was keenly felt. Wives and children often found themselves thrust into roles they were unprepared for, managing household finances and daily survival in neighborhoods already marked by scarcity. Without the steady income provided by a soldier's pay, many families faced eviction from their insulae or struggled to afford basic necessities like food and firewood. Some women turned to work in Rome's crowded markets, selling produce or handmade goods, while others took in laundry or sewing. The labor was grueling and poorly compensated, but it was a lifeline. In the countryside, the challenges were no less severe. Farmers' families bore the burden of maintaining fields and livestock in their loved ones' absence. The demands of agriculture, plowing, sowing, harvesting, required manpower that was often unavailable. Women and children worked tirelessly to fill the gaps, their efforts critical to ensuring the family's survival. For many rural families, These hardships were compounded by the ever-present threat of taxation, as imperial agents demanded their due regardless of circumstance. Families that could not meet these obligations risked losing their land, their labor rendered futile in the shadow of economic ruin. The emotional toll of separation was as profound as the economic strain. Letters from soldiers stationed in distant provinces, when they reached their intended recipients, offered brief glimpses of solace and connection. These fragments of communication, often dictated to scribes, revealed the deep bonds between soldiers and their families. A soldier might reassure his wife of his health or instruct her to care for their children and property, his words tinged with longing and hope. For the families, these letters were treasured reminders of their absent loved ones, though the long intervals between correspondence left many in a perpetual state of worry. The uncertainty of a soldier's fate was a constant source of anxiety. Campaigns often lasted for years, and news of battles or losses traveled slowly. A knock at the door could bring relief in the form of a letter, or devastation in the form of a messenger bearing grim news. Widows of fallen soldiers faced particularly precarious futures, their status and security dependent on the generosity of patrons or the mercy of local magistrates. Those with young children carried the additional burden of raising them alone, their struggle to provide compounded by the societal stigma of widowhood. For the children of soldiers, the absence of a father figure shaped their upbringing in profound ways. Sons, often expected to follow in their father's footsteps, were left to imagine the courage and strength of the men who fought for Rome. Daughters, meanwhile, assumed responsibilities beyond their years, assisting their mothers in maintaining the household or contributing to the family's income. These experiences fostered resilience and adaptability, but they also underscored the sacrifices made by those who remained at home. Communal bonds provided a crucial source of support for soldiers' families. Neighbors often stepped in to share resources, labor, or childcare, their solidarity a counterbalance to the hardships of isolation. Festivals and religious observances offered moments of collective relief, as families gathered to honor deities like Mars, the god of war, or Juno, protector of women and children. These rituals reinforced a sense of belonging and hope, even as they reminded participants of the sacrifices demanded by Rome's military ambitions. The state, for its part, recognized the need to support soldiers' families, though its efforts were often inconsistent. The distribution of grain through the annona provided some relief to urban families, while occasional decrees sought to address the needs of widows and orphans. Veterans' colonies, established as rewards for retired soldiers, created opportunities for families to reunite and rebuild, though these settlements were often located in remote areas, requiring further adjustments. The stories of soldiers' families, though less visible than the exploits of the legions, are woven into the fabric of Rome's history. Inscriptions and epitaphs speak of women who persevered against overwhelming odds, their resilience etched into stone. To Flavia, who waited faithfully for her husband's return, reads one, a testament to love and endurance. These fragments of memory remind us that the cost of war extended far beyond the battlefield, shaping the lives of those who remained behind. As the narrative transitions to the next chapter, the focus shifts from the struggles of soldiers' families to the vibrant lives of those who inhabited Rome's provincial cities. These urban centers, often overshadowed by the capital, reveal the diversity and innovation that flourished on the empire's periphery, offering a new lens through which to view the resilience and creativity of Rome's forgotten majority. Far from the towering columns of the Forum and the gilded domes of Rome, a network of cities spread across the empire quietly thrived, each with its own distinct rhythm. These provincial cities, often overlooked in favor of the capital, were the backbone of Rome's vast dominion. They were places of innovation, cultural exchange, and resilience, where the echoes of Roman power intertwined with local traditions to create vibrant urban landscapes. In many ways, provincial cities mirrored the capital. They boasted forums, baths, and amphitheaters, their architecture a testament to the spread of Roman engineering and aesthetics. Yet, each city adapted these templates to its unique context. In Ephesus, the Grand Library of Celsus stood as a beacon of learning, while in Leptis Magna, elaborate marketplaces showcased the wealth of North African trade. These cities were far more than miniature Romes. They were living entities shaped by the confluence of empire and local identity. Life in provincial cities was a dynamic interplay of Roman influence and regional heritage. Urban centers such as Antioch, Carthage, and Londinium became melting pots where diverse populations coexisted. Merchants from the eastern provinces traded silks and spices alongside local artisans, while Greek philosophers debated with Roman officials in bustling forums. The streets echoed with a cacophony of languages, from Latin and Greek to Aramaic and Punic, creating a tapestry of voices that reflected the empire's reach. For the majority of provincial inhabitants, daily life revolved around work, family, and community. Farmers and laborers flocked to cities to sell their produce and wares, their presence animating marketplaces with the vibrant chaos of commerce. Artisans crafted pottery, textiles, and jewelry, their skills passed down through generations. Taverns and street-side food stalls offered spaces for rest and gossip, their patrons forming the heartbeat of urban life. Religious practices in provincial cities highlighted the integration of Roman and local traditions. Temples to Jupiter and Venus often stood alongside shrines dedicated to regional deities, their coexistence a reflection of cultural accommodation. In Gaul, for instance, the Roman Mars blended with the local god Teutates, embodying both martial prowess and tribal protection. Festivals and rituals provided a sense of continuity and belonging, their rhythms grounding communities in the face of change. Yet, life in provincial cities was not without its challenges. Urban infrastructure, though modeled on Roman innovation, often struggled to meet the needs of growing populations. Water supply systems, reliant on aqueducts and cisterns, frequently fell into disrepair. Streets, bustling by day, could become dangerous after nightfall, with crime a persistent concern. In some cities, the divide between rich and poor mirrored that of the capital, with sprawling villas perched on hillsides while cramped tenements crowded the lower quarters. Education and cultural exchange flourished in provincial cities, creating pockets of intellectual vibrancy. Schools and libraries offered access to learning for those who could afford it, while public readings and theatrical performances brought stories to life for wider audiences. The spread of Roman citizenship in the provinces, particularly after the Edict of Caracalla in 212 CE, further integrated these cities into the empire's cultural and political fabric, fostering a shared identity that transcended local boundaries. Trade was the lifeblood of provincial cities, connecting them to the broader network of the empire. Ports like Ostia, Caesarea, and Alexandria hummed with activity, their docks piled high with goods from across the Mediterranean and beyond. Grain from Egypt, wine from Hispania, and silver from Britannia flowed through these hubs, their movement sustaining the empire's economy. Merchants and sailors navigated these routes with a mixture of ambition and resilience, their lives defined by the unpredictability of winds and markets. Provincial cities also played a crucial role in the military structure of Rome. Fortified towns served as bases for legions, their presence both a deterrent against rebellion and a source of local employment. Soldiers, many of whom hailed from the provinces, brought with them the customs and languages of their homelands, adding to the cultural mosaic. Upon retirement, these veterans often settled in the cities where they had served, their pensions and skills contributing to urban development. The stories of individuals who lived in provincial cities offer glimpses into the diversity and complexity of these urban centers. Inscriptions and artifacts reveal lives both ordinary and extraordinary, a merchant's gratitude for safe passage, a freedman's dedication of a statue to his patron, a child's toy buried alongside them in a grave. These fragments of history remind us that provincial cities were not just outposts of empire but thriving communities in their own right. The resilience of provincial cities was tested in times of crisis. Natural disasters, economic downturns, and invasions challenged their stability, forcing their inhabitants to adapt. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 CE, which buried Pompeii and Herculaneum, is a poignant example of both the vulnerability and the enduring legacy of these cities. Archaeological excavations have preserved their streets and homes, offering an unparalleled window into the daily lives of their residents. As the narrative shifts to the next chapter, the focus turns from the living cities of the provinces to the customs surrounding death and burial among Rome's lower classes. These practices, steeped in tradition and necessity, reveal yet another dimension of life in the empire, where even in death, the echoes of Rome's diverse and interconnected world could be felt. In the shadow of Rome, life unfolded for its masses with a persistent rhythm. Yet for all its vibrancy, life in ancient Rome was never far from the specter of death. Disease, accidents, and the hardships of labor claimed lives frequently, especially among the lower classes. For Rome's commoners, the way they honored their dead was a reflection of their resilience, resourcefulness, and the enduring human need to commemorate those who had passed. Their funerary practices, though constrained by economic limitations, were rich with meaning and deeply embedded in the social fabric. Death was a communal event in Rome, particularly for the lower classes who relied on collective support to navigate its logistical and emotional demands. The absence of wealth did not diminish the significance of the rituals surrounding death. Rather, it infused them with a different kind of value, one rooted in community and tradition. From the moment of passing, the body of the deceased was prepared with care, washed and anointed with oil. This act, often performed by family members, symbolized the transition from life to the afterlife, an acknowledgement of the body's journey toward repose. Public mourning was an integral part of Roman funerals, though its expression varied by class. For the wealthy, grand processions with professional mourners, musicians, and elaborate masks of ancestors were common, showcasing status and legacy. For the poor, mourning took on a quieter, more intimate form. Families and friends gathered to accompany the body to its final resting place, their steps measured and solemn. Along the way, passers-by might join, their presence a testament to the communal bonds that defined life in Rome's crowded neighborhoods. The burial itself was dictated by both tradition and practicality. While cremation was the dominant practice during much of the Republic and early Empire, inhumation became increasingly common in later periods. For the poor, cremation often involved modest pyres, the ashes collected and placed in simple clay urns. These urns were interred in communal burial grounds or columbaria, underground chambers filled with niches that held the remains of multiple individuals. These spaces, though humble, were imbued with a sense of shared identity, their walls lined with inscriptions that spoke of love, remembrance, and hope for the afterlife. Inhumation, while less expensive than cremation, presented its own challenges. Simple wooden coffins or even shrouds served as the final vessels for many commoners. These were buried in shallow graves within shared plots, the earth packed down by the same hands that had labored alongside the deceased in life. Markers, if used, were often rudimentary, a slab of stone or a piece of pottery bearing the name and a brief epitaph. Yet, even these modest memorials carried profound meaning, offering a glimpse into the lives and values of those they honored. Religious beliefs played a central role in shaping Roman funerary practices. For the lower classes, household gods and ancestral spirits were as integral to death rituals as they were to daily life. Offerings of food, wine, and incense were made to appease these spirits, ensuring their favor and protection. Festivals like the Parentalia and Lemuria provided opportunities for families to honor their dead collectively, their prayers and offerings reinforcing the bonds between the living and the departed. Economic constraints often necessitated creativity in how the poor approached burial. Burial societies, or collegia funeratica, emerged as a vital solution, particularly in urban centers like Rome. These organizations functioned as mutual aid networks, pooling resources to provide members with a dignified funeral. Members paid regular dues, which were used to cover the costs of burial plots, ceremonies, and even communal feasts in honor of the deceased. The collegia not only alleviated the financial burden of death, but also created a sense of belonging and solidarity among their members. The stories of individuals buried in these communal spaces reveal the humanity and diversity of Rome's lower classes. Inscriptions speak of freedmen who had built new lives after slavery, of mothers who had borne the weight of family life, and of children whose brief existences were marked by love and sorrow. These epitaphs, though brief, capture the essence of lives lived with dignity amid hardship. One poignant inscription reads, "To Gaia, who brought light to our days, may her journey to the spirits be swift." Despite their resourcefulness, the poor's burials often highlighted the stark inequalities of Roman society. The grand mausoleums and elaborate tombs of the elite stood in sharp contrast to the simplicity of common graves, their inscriptions boasting of achievements and lineage. Yet, even in these disparities, there was a shared humanity. Death leveled the social hierarchy, reminding all Romans of their mortality and the transient nature of life. Natural disasters, invasions, and urban crises sometimes disrupted these carefully maintained traditions. Mass graves, hastily dug during times of plague or war, underscore the fragility of even the most enduring customs. Yet, even in such circumstances, traces of care remain evident. The arrangement of bodies, the inclusion of a token or charm, and the alignment of graves suggest that even in chaos, the desire to honor the dead persisted. As the narrative shifts from death to the living norms that governed Roman society, the next chapter explores the unwritten laws, the social etiquette and norms that shaped interactions among the lower classes. These customs, often unspoken but deeply ingrained, reveal another layer of the invisible rules that governed life in ancient Rome, offering continuity from the traditions of remembrance to the daily rituals of respect and community. In the crowded streets of Rome, where laborers, merchants, and artisans moved in a perpetual dance of work and survival, another layer of society thrived: the unwritten rules that govern behavior. These norms, though absent from the tablets of Roman law, shaped daily interactions with as much force as any imperial edict. Among the lower classes, social etiquette and communal expectations fostered a delicate balance of respect, obligation, and honor, ensuring cohesion in a world often marked by scarcity and hardship. Hospitality was a cornerstone of Roman life, a practice deeply embedded in both tradition and necessity. While grand feasts in aristocratic villas showcased elite opulence, hospitality among the poor was more modest, yet no less meaningful. Sharing a simple meal of bread, olives, and diluted wine with a neighbor or traveler was an act of solidarity, a way of affirming communal bonds. For many plebeians who lived in cramped insulae with little privacy, opening one's home, even temporarily, required sacrifices. Yet these acts of generosity were not just social rituals. They were safeguards against isolation and precarity. The rules of hospitality extended beyond the offering of food and shelter. Guests were expected to reciprocate kindness, whether through labor, gifts, or simply by carrying tales of their host's generosity to others. Violations of these unwritten laws could lead to ostracism or even violence, as trust was a currency more valuable than coin in the close-knit quarters of Rome's poorer neighborhoods. Honor, too, played a significant role in shaping interactions among the lower classes. Though the concept was often associated with the elite's public displays of virtue and achievement, it had an equally potent, if less visible, presence among the common people. For a laborer, artisan, or vendor, honor was tied to their reputation for fairness, reliability, and skill. A blacksmith who overcharged or delivered shoddy work risked more than losing customers. They risked losing their place in the community's delicate web of trust. For women, honor often intersected with perceptions of virtue and familial loyalty. While elite women navigated these expectations within the confines of wealth and visibility, poorer women faced the additional challenge of balancing societal judgments with economic necessity. A market vendor's reputation, for instance, depended not only on the quality of her goods but also on her demeanor, her ability to bargain firmly without appearing overbearing, to engage politely without being seen as servile. These subtle performances of honor helped to define a woman's standing in her community. Conflicts among neighbors were inevitable in the densely packed insulae and bustling markets. The unwritten rules of dispute resolution prioritized negotiation and compromise over escalation. Elders or respected members of the community often acted as mediators, their judgments guided by tradition rather than formal law. Public shaming, an effective tool for ensuring compliance with communal norms, was a common outcome for those who refused to reconcile. A mason who neglected to repay a debt or a washerwoman who spread false gossip might find their names scrawled on walls or mentioned in the sharp-tongued verses of street poets. Community responsibility was another pillar of social norms, rooted in the shared struggles of daily life. In the aftermath of a fire, flood, or collapse of a poorly built insula, neighbors banded together to provide aid, pooling resources to rebuild or support those who had lost everything. These acts of collective care were not just expressions of goodwill. They were practical necessities in a society where state support was minimal for the lower classes. Religious rituals and festivals reinforced these norms, offering structured opportunities for communal engagement. The Saturnalia, with its temporary inversion of social roles, reminded Romans of the interconnectedness of all classes, even if only for a brief period. Household rituals, such as offerings to the lair's household gods or blessings of new ventures, often became communal affairs in poorer neighborhoods, where space and resources were shared. The spoken and unspoken expectations extended to public spaces as well. Markets, forums, and bathhouses operated under an implicit code of conduct that ensured their smooth functioning. Vendors knew the importance of maintaining cleanliness and order at their stalls, while bathhouse patrons adhered to unwritten rules about queuing and sharing space. Violations, though rare, could lead to confrontations that disrupted the fragile harmony of these communal hubs. Children learned these norms from an early age, absorbing them through observation and participation. A boy accompanying his father to the market would witness how to negotiate without offending, how to greet elders with respect, and how to navigate the social intricacies of sharing a meal. A girl helping her mother prepare offerings for the household shrine would internalize the rituals of reciprocity and gratitude that bound the family to the community. These lessons, passed down through generations, ensured the continuity of social etiquette in Rome's ever-changing urban landscape. Despite their universality, these unwritten laws were not immune to the pressures of inequality. The wealthier classes often dismissed or exploited the social norms of the poor, leveraging their power to bypass expectations or impose their own. A landlord might ignore the communal ethic of fairness when raising rents, while an elite patron might exploit their client's obligations for personal gain. These breaches of etiquette, though rarely addressed directly, fueled the simmering tensions between Rome's classes, manifesting in acts of defiance and resistance. As the narrative shifts to the environmental challenges that tested Rome's resilience, the next chapter explores how ordinary people adapted to disasters such as fires, floods, and famines. These events, while disruptive, also highlighted the strength of the social fabric woven by Rome's unwritten laws, offering continuity from the norms that shaped daily life to the extraordinary efforts required in times of crisis. Rome was a city of grandeur and fragility, its marble monuments and bustling streets as vulnerable to the forces of nature as its citizens were to the uncertainties of life. Fires roared through its tightly packed insulae, rivers swelled to swallow neighborhoods, and famines gnawed at the very heart of its population. Yet, amid these calamities, the ordinary people of Rome displayed extraordinary resilience, their ingenuity and communal strength enabling them to endure and rebuild. Fires were an ever-present threat in Rome, a city where wooden beams supported precarious multi-story tenements, and open flames were a necessity for cooking and light. The densely populated neighborhoods, with their labyrinthine alleys, created a tinderbox waiting for a spark. One of the most infamous conflagrations, the Great Fire of 64 CE, burned for 6 days, destroying vast swaths of the city. While this disaster captured the attention of historians, smaller, localized fires were a grim reality of daily life for Rome's poor. When a fire erupted, the immediate response was a communal effort. Neighbors formed human chains to pass buckets of water drawn from public fountains or wells, their coordinated actions a testament to the strength of community bonds. For many, the priority was not just extinguishing the flames but salvaging possessions before the fire consumed them. Families worked together to carry furniture, valuables, and even livestock to safety, their hurried movements marked by cries of urgency and hope. After the flames subsided, the process of recovery began. Local artisans and laborers were among the first to mobilize, their skills essential for rebuilding homes and restoring infrastructure. Temporary shelters sprang up in courtyards and open spaces, their occupants relying on the generosity of neighbors and the modest assistance provided by the state. Emperor Augustus, recognizing the recurring threat of fires, established the Vigiles, a fire brigade composed of freedmen to patrol the city and respond to emergencies. Despite their efforts, the burden of recovery often fell on the shoulders of the affected communities, who relied on their resourcefulness and solidarity to reclaim their lives. Floods were another persistent menace, particularly for those living near the Tiber River. Seasonal rains could swell the river to dangerous levels, inundating markets, homes, and granaries. The damage to grain stores was particularly devastating, as it threatened the food supply for the city's poorest residents. Floodwaters carried debris and waste, turning streets into hazardous waterways and heightening the risk of disease. The aftermath of a flood required both individual determination and collective action. Families cleared mud and debris from their homes, salvaging what they could and patching up walls with whatever materials were available. In the markets, vendors struggled to restore their stalls, their goods often reduced to waterlogged remnants. Public spaces became hubs of activity, where neighbors shared tools and labor to rebuild. The resilience of these communities was evident in their ability to restore a semblance of normalcy even in the face of repeated disasters. Famine, the most insidious of the three calamities, struck not with the sudden ferocity of fire or flood, but with a creeping inevitability. Poor harvests, disruptions in trade, or political instability could all lead to food shortages, leaving the city's lower classes to bear the brunt of hunger. The state's grain dole, the annona, provided some relief, but its distribution was often fraught with corruption and inefficiency. Long queues formed outside granaries, where the desperation of the hungry sometimes erupted into violence. When famine tightened its grip, the ingenuity of Rome's commoners came to the fore. Households stretched their meager supplies, mixing flour with sawdust or other fillers to create bread that was barely edible but sustaining. Community networks became lifelines, as neighbors shared what little they had or bartered goods and services to survive. Public spaces such as bathhouses and temples became gathering points for distributing aid, their steps crowded with those seeking solace and sustenance. Religious rituals and offerings played a significant role in the collective response to disasters. Romans turned to the gods with renewed fervor, their prayers and sacrifices a blend of desperation and hope. Temples dedicated to Jupiter, Ceres, and Neptune became focal points for public ceremonies, where priests led processions and rituals to appease the deities believed to control fire, harvests, and waters. These acts of faith, while deeply spiritual, also reinforced communal bonds, uniting people in shared purpose and resilience. The resilience of Rome's commoners extended beyond immediate recovery. In the wake of disasters, they adapted their practices to mitigate future risks. Fire-resistant building materials, though expensive, became more common in wealthier neighborhoods, while communal wells and cisterns were improved to ensure access to clean water. Flood-prone areas saw the construction of embankments and drainage systems. Though these efforts often benefited the elite more than the poor, stories of survival and heroism during these calamities reveal the depth of human determination. Inscriptions and anecdotes preserved in texts hint at the courage of individuals who risked their lives to save others, or the ingenuity of those who found solutions to seemingly insurmountable problems. A baker's inscription might recount how he kept his ovens running during a famine, feeding his neighborhood when all seemed lost, while a simple epitaph might honor a woman who sheltered her neighbors during a fire. As we transition to the next chapter, exploring how education and informal learning shaped the lives of Rome's majority, the resilience displayed in the face of disasters serves as a testament to the enduring strength of communal bonds and human ingenuity. These traits, forged in the crucible of crisis, also form the foundation for the transmission of knowledge and skills that sustain the empire's working class, ensuring that even in adversity, the spirit of Rome's forgotten majority endured. In the streets of ancient Rome, knowledge flowed as freely as the chatter of its people. Though formal education was a privilege largely reserved for the elite, the thirst for learning among the non-elite found expression in a myriad of ways. From the teachings of informal mentors to the storytelling traditions that preserved collective wisdom, Rome's forgotten majority carved out spaces for intellectual growth in a society that often overlooked their potential. Formal schooling in Rome, while celebrated in historical texts, was primarily the domain of the wealthy. Boys from elite families were sent to ludi magister, primary schools, to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic. As they progressed, they studied rhetoric and philosophy under esteemed tutors, preparing for careers in politics or law. But for the lower classes, access to such institutions was rare. The cost of tuition, materials like wax tablets and styluses, and the opportunity cost of lost labor made formal education unattainable for most plebeian families. Yet, learning did not stop at the gates of elite schools. The streets of Rome and the countryside beyond became classrooms for those who could not afford formal instruction. Apprenticeships were a cornerstone of informal education, passing down trade skills through hands-on experience. A blacksmith's workshop echoed with the clang of metal, and the instructions of a master teaching his apprentice how to shape iron into tools and weapons. Bakers, stonemasons, and carpenters followed similar paths, where observation and practice were more valuable than written texts. Women, too, participated in these informal systems of learning, though their opportunities were shaped by the gendered expectations of the time. Girls learned domestic skills from their mothers, including cooking, weaving, and managing household finances. These lessons, though centered on the home, were vital for navigating the complexities of daily life. In markets, women picked up numeracy and bargaining skills, while midwives and healers honed their craft through mentorship and the oral transmission of knowledge. These practical educations were no less rigorous than the academic pursuits of the elite, requiring ingenuity and adaptability. Literacy among the lower classes was more widespread than is often assumed, though it was typically functional rather than literary. Inscriptions, graffiti, and business records reveal a world where many commoners could read and write at a basic level. Shopkeepers kept ledgers, laborers signed contracts, and messages scrawled on walls offered glimpses of personal expression. The walls of Pompeii, preserved by volcanic ash, bear graffiti that ranges from political slogans to crude jokes, showcasing the diverse uses of literacy in everyday life. Public spaces also served as arenas for learning. Forums and marketplaces were hubs of activity where ideas were exchanged alongside goods. Orators practicing their craft attracted audiences who absorbed lessons in rhetoric and persuasion. Public readings of laws or proclamations provided not only information, but also an opportunity to hear and critique the workings of power. Even the theater, with its comedies and tragedies, offered moral lessons and commentary on societal norms, engaging audiences in a shared intellectual experience. Storytelling was another vital form of education, especially in rural areas where formal schooling was almost non-existent. Elders passed down tales that blended history, myth, and practical advice, ensuring that knowledge was preserved across generations. These stories often carried moral lessons or warnings, teaching listeners how to navigate the challenges of life within a community. The oral tradition was not static but evolved with each retelling, reflecting the changing concerns and values of the people who preserved it. Religion, too, played a role in shaping informal education. Temples and shrines were centers of learning where priests and priestesses taught rituals, prayers, and the significance of the gods in daily life. Festivals and ceremonies provided opportunities for communal participation, reinforcing shared beliefs and traditions. For many, the act of offering a prayer or making a sacrifice was not just an expression of faith, but also a lesson in cultural identity and communal belonging. The state occasionally recognized the value of educating the masses, though such efforts were often driven by pragmatic concerns rather than altruism. Public proclamations and monumental inscriptions were designed to communicate imperial achievements and reinforce loyalty to Rome. These texts, displayed prominently in public spaces, served as both propaganda and educational tools, shaping the collective memory and identity of the empire's subjects. Despite their resourcefulness, the lower classes faced significant barriers to education. The lack of access to written texts limited their ability to engage with broader intellectual currents. Books in the form of scrolls were expensive and often inaccessible, kept in the private libraries of the elite or in public libraries that were not always open to commoners. This exclusion underscored the divide between those who could afford to cultivate knowledge and those who relied on more ephemeral forms of learning. Yet, the resilience of Rome's non-elite ensured that education, in its many forms, flourished despite these challenges. The ingenuity of a mason calculating angles for a new structure, the creativity of a storyteller weaving tales of gods and heroes, and the perseverance of a mother teaching her children to read simple inscriptions on a shrine all speak to the vibrant intellectual life of the lower classes. As the narrative moves to explore the relationships between Romans and their animals in the next chapter, the skills and knowledge passed through informal learning highlight the interconnectedness of people, their environments, and the creatures that shared their world. This transition from human ingenuity to the bonds with animals offers a new perspective on the daily lives and values of Rome's forgotten majority. The streets of Rome were alive with the sounds of animals. Dogs barked in alleyways, chickens clucked in courtyards, and the steady clip-clop of hooves echoed through the city as carts ferried goods to market. In the countryside, sheep grazed on rolling hills while oxen plowed fields with patient strength. Animals were not merely a backdrop to Roman life. They were essential companions, workers, and symbols woven into the daily existence of the empire's common people. Pets in ancient Rome served as both companions and status symbols. Among the lower classes, dogs were the most common pets, valued for their loyalty and utility. Small, nimble dogs often guarded homes and shops, their sharp barks warning of intruders. Larger breeds, such as the Molossian hounds, were used to protect livestock and property, their imposing size a deterrent to thieves. Inscriptions and mosaics reveal the affection Romans felt for their canine companions, with epitaphs for deceased dogs expressing gratitude for their friendship and service. "To my faithful guard who watched over our home," reads one such inscription, a poignant reminder of the bond between human and animal. Cats, though less common than dogs, were valued for their prowess in hunting vermin. Found more frequently in rural areas, they prowled granaries and barns, keeping rodent populations in check. Their sleek, quiet movements and independent nature made them both useful and mysterious figures in Roman households. Other small pets, such as birds, were prized for their beauty and song. Sparrows, finches, and even exotic parrots adorned cages in homes, their vibrant feathers and cheerful melodies bringing joy to families across the social spectrum. In the countryside, livestock were the lifeblood of agricultural communities. Oxen and mules provided the muscle needed to plow fields and transport goods, their sturdy frames indispensable to rural economies. Sheep and goats, prized for their milk, meat, and wool, grazed on common pastures, their bleats a familiar sound in villages. Chickens, ubiquitous in both urban and rural settings, supplied eggs and meat, their clutches carefully guarded by householders who depended on their productivity. Horses, though expensive to maintain, were vital to transportation and communication, especially for merchants and messengers. Donkeys, by contrast, were the workhorses of the poor, their smaller size and lower cost making them a practical choice for farmers and laborers. These animals, though often overworked, were integral to the flow of goods and people across Rome's vast network of roads and trade routes. The relationship between Romans and their animals extended beyond practicality. It was also deeply symbolic. Animals featured prominently in religious rituals, serving as offerings to the gods. Bulls, sheep, and goats were sacrificed during ceremonies to secure divine favor, their blood spilled on altars as priests recited prayers. These rituals, though solemn, underscored the interconnectedness of human and animal life in Roman culture, where the fate of one was often tied to the blessings of the other. In urban centers, animals played a central role in the marketplace. Cattle markets buzzed with activity as traders haggled over the price of oxen and sheep, while vendors sold milk, cheese, and eggs sourced from nearby farms. The noise and smells of these markets created a sensory tapestry that defined daily life for Rome's lower classes. Livestock were both commodities and companions, their presence a constant reminder of the delicate balance between sustenance and survival. Entertainment also drew heavily on the presence of animals. The Colosseum, a symbol of Roman grandeur, hosted spectacles where exotic beasts from across the empire, lions, tigers, and elephants, were paraded and pitted against gladiators or each other. While these events showcased the empire's reach and power, they also revealed a stark contrast to the utilitarian relationship most Romans had with animals. For the common people, animals were not objects of spectacle but partners in the daily grind. Despite their utility, animals in ancient Rome were not immune to cruelty. Overworked donkeys and mules bore heavy loads until they collapsed, and livestock were often slaughtered under unsanitary conditions. Yet, there were also moments of tenderness and care. Farmers spoke to their oxen as they worked the fields, their words of encouragement reflecting a bond born of shared toil. Pet owners mourned the loss of beloved dogs and birds, their grief a testament to the emotional depth of their relationships. Children, too, formed connections with animals, their interactions offering lessons in responsibility and empathy. A child might feed chickens or help herd sheep, their small hands learning the rhythms of care that sustained their families. These early experiences with animals taught not only practical skills, but also the value of cooperation and interdependence, lessons that echoed throughout their lives. As the empire expanded, the diversity of animals in Rome grew. Trade routes brought camels from Arabia, elephants from Africa, and peacocks from India, their exotic appearances capturing the imagination of Romans from all walks of life. These animals, though rare and often inaccessible to the poor, symbolized the vastness of Rome's dominion and its connection to distant lands. The role of animals in Rome's lower classes was not limited to work and companionship. It also extended to cultural expression. Folk tales and proverbs often featured animals, their behaviors serving as metaphors for human virtues and vices. Aesop's fables, popular throughout the Roman world, used animal characters to convey moral lessons that resonated with audiences across social divides. These stories, passed down through generations, reflected the intimate knowledge Romans had of the creatures that shared their world. As we leave behind the bustling markets and pastoral fields filled with animals, the next chapter will delve into the broader legacy of Rome's forgotten majority. Their lives, intertwined with those of their animal companions, offer a rich tapestry of resilience and resourcefulness that continues to shape our understanding of ancient Rome. This transition underscores the enduring impact of the ordinary people who, alongside their animal partners, built and sustained one of history's greatest civilizations. In the shadow of Rome's great achievements, its enduring monuments, sprawling empire, and celebrated leaders, lies a vast and often overlooked legacy, the lives of its ordinary people. These men, women, and children, whose stories rarely grace the pages of ancient histories, were the true architects of Rome's success. Their labor, creativity, and resilience not only sustained the empire, but also left an indelible mark on its culture and legacy. To examine their lives is to shift the lens of history, reframing our understanding of Rome not as the story of emperors and elite families, but as a complex mosaic built on the contributions of the many. The rediscovery of Rome's forgotten majority began with the ground beneath its ruins. Archaeological excavations, from the preserved streets of Pompeii to the rural villas of Gaul, have unearthed the physical remnants of daily life. Simple pottery, crude tools, graffiti etched on walls. These artifacts, humble yet powerful, give voice to those who were otherwise silent in the historical record. A fragment of a clay jar, stamped with a maker's mark, speaks of the craftsman who shaped it. A child's toy, buried in ash, hints at a moment of joy amidst the routines of survival. Together, these discoveries illuminate the experiences of Rome's non-elite, revealing lives of both struggle and triumph. The legacy of Rome's common people is perhaps most evident in its cultural and social fabric. Many of the traditions and practices that defined Roman identity, from religious festivals to culinary habits, originated or thrived among the lower classes. The street food that sustained laborers, the prayers offered at household shrines, and the raucous celebrations of Saturnalia were all expressions of a shared culture that transcended class divisions. These elements, carried forward by centuries of adaptation and evolution, form the foundation of many aspects of modern Western culture. The resilience of Rome's non-elite is another cornerstone of their legacy. In the face of inequality, environmental challenges, and political upheaval, they demonstrated remarkable ingenuity and strength. The survival strategies developed by plebeians, communal labor, mutual aid, and resourcefulness, are echoed in today's grassroots movements and cooperative organizations. Their ability to adapt to changing circumstances, whether through informal education, shared resources, or collective action, offers timeless lessons in perseverance and solidarity. The forgotten majority also left a profound imprint on Rome's infrastructure and economy. The roads, aqueducts, and public works that defined Roman engineering were built by the hands of laborers and slaves, whose efforts were rarely acknowledged but essential. The bustling marketplaces and trade networks that connected the empire relied on the energy and innovation of merchants, porters, and artisans. These contributions, while often invisible in historical narratives, were the backbone of Rome's material success. Modern scholarship has embraced the task of uncovering these hidden stories, challenging the traditional focus on elites and their achievements. Historians, archaeologists, and anthropologists have pieced together a more inclusive picture of Rome, one that values the experiences of all its inhabitants. This shift reflects a broader movement in historical inquiry, one that seeks to amplify marginalized voices and question narratives that have long excluded them. The parallels between ancient Rome and contemporary society are striking. Just as Rome's forgotten majority played a pivotal role in sustaining their world, today's essential workers, caregivers, and laborers form the foundation of modern economies and communities. The lessons of resilience, creativity, and solidarity that emerge from the lives of Rome's non-elite are as relevant now as they were 2 millennia ago. They remind us that the strength of a society lies not in its monuments, but in its people, in the networks of care, cooperation, and ingenuity that sustain daily life. Reframing Rome's history to include its forgotten majority also challenges us to reconsider what we value in the past and present. By shining a light on the lives of those who lived in the margins, we gain a fuller understanding of the forces that shape civilizations. This inclusivity enriches our perspective, allowing us to see the interconnectedness of human experiences across time and space. As we close this exploration of Rome's untold stories, the legacy of its common people remains a testament to the power of human resilience and creativity. Their lives, though often obscured, were the foundation of an empire that continues to captivate and inspire. In their struggles and successes, we find reflections of our own humanity, a reminder that history is not only the story of the powerful but also the enduring tale of the many. The Untold Rome is not just a history of the forgotten, it is a celebration of their legacy, an invitation to see the world through their eyes, and to honor the contributions that have shaped the course of history. As we move forward, may we carry their lessons with us, building a future that values every voice and remembers that greatness is not the domain of the few, but the achievement of all. Thank you for listening to The Untold Rome, Hidden Stories of the Forgotten Majority. Written by A. Peters and narrated by Michael K. This is the end.